Chapter 110. Longtu Basra, has the moon goddess gone mad? Why would she release this mad dog? The arrival of the powerful Valkyrie under the moon goddess isn't a secret. After all, the difference between a Valkyrie and a mortal is obvious. Not to mention, that one doesn't seem to have any intention of hiding her identity at all. She spends her days in the city, living a normal life, and appearing in public is astonishingly high. In the legends of the Order gods, the Valkyrie are all incredible heroes in history. At the end of their lifespan, they were recognized by the true gods and signed a soul contract to fight for the true gods, becoming the glorious and undying warriors under the true gods. Of course, this is the positive side of things. But if I were to say it, the Valkyrie only look glamorous on the surface. Throw away those boring hymns, and in reality, they are just another type of undead in the Order faction. Furthermore, they are unlucky fellows who accidentally signed a contract to sell themselves for life. They don't even have the freedom of a private life or annual leave. The most obvious point is that even though they have physical bodies and desires, they are unable to leave behind descendants. This is determined by the nature of their souls, which have already entered the cycle of reincarnation. No matter how they replace their physical bodies, it is the same. If it is just to restore their physical bodies and desires, my undead modification technique is able to do it too. On the other hand, the reincarnated god envoys and angels are able to leave behind descendants because they have already completed the cycle of reincarnation and become a living being once again. In reality, if an angel were to be transformed from a human, it is quite similar to the reincarnation of a demon from the lower plane. Furthermore, just like the undead, whose name is even nicer, the Valkyrie are also extremely obsessed. They are indeed great heroes in history, but great heroes don't mean that they are saints who have no desires. Even after becoming Valkyrie, they still maintain a high level of obsession with their hobbies and the past when they were alive. Basra's past experiences can be summed up with just a single word from his nickname, Longtu. He was a nobleman born as a wood elf. Back then, the Elven dynasty was still in its heyday. He should have had a happy childhood, but he didn't have many good days. In the era where he lived, the dragon race wasn't as rare as it is now. Just like in most fairy tales, he once had a blissful family. However, when a green dragon passed by his house, it casually spat out a mouthful of dragon breath. It's the same as how some uncivilized fellows spit out casually. However, if humans aren't civilized, they might only be met with an auntie with a red armband. The result of a dragon's uncivilized breath is that other than Bastler, who managed to escape from the calamity, everyone else was wiped out. Alright, the rest of the story was not worth mentioning. Under the wheel of history, the orphan youth slowly grew up and finally set foot on the peak of the world. However, even after he became famous, he still could not find the green dragon that killed his parents. Since I can't find it, I'll just kill all the evil dragons. This is not only for revenge, but also to prevent tragedies like mine from happening again. This was undoubtedly the arrogant words of a paranoid person. However, when the person who said this was a super strong person who had the ability to do it, the tragedy of the dragons came. He hated dragons to the core, and his hunting range was not limited to green dragons. In his eyes, these behemoths were always a threat. Only a dead dragon was a good dragon. That was why he was unscrupulous and didn't care whether they were good or evil. He didn't even spare young dragons and dragon eggs. As long as they were related to a real dragon, they deserved to die. The revenge of the dragons caused him to lose his wife, children, and friends. This caused him to be lonely once again, and he became a world-famous professional dragonslayer. As a perfect paranoid and dragonslayer hero, all of his abilities were prepared for the dragons. Dragonslayer guns and Dragonslayer swords were all equipped. There were records that he had killed at least 4 dragons, and there was no lack of demigod-level super dragons. When he aroused the wrath of the dragons and was surrounded and beaten to death, he also successfully dragged a 3-digit number of dragons down with him. Be obedient, baby. If you continue to make a fuss, Longtu Basra will come. These words became the trump card that dragon mothers used to scare their baby dragons. Through the knowledge passed down through their bloodlines, the young dragons knew that this code name represented countless dragon lives, and they were filled with fear of this name since they were young. Even the fearless little Red had fallen asleep to childhood stories. When the name Basra was mentioned, she would definitely be filled with hesitation and unease. In fact, just because the moon goddess Patricia, who was also the goddess of the hunt and the guardian goddess of the lost, had taken in Basra's Valkyrie, she became the enemy of the dragons. Her relationship with the dragon god was extremely bad, and 2 divine wars had broken out between them. In terms of ability, it was absolutely no problem to send Basra down to the mortal world. Even if the body of Valkyrie could only barely reach the level of a demigod, he still had the combat power to rival the 9-headed dragon emperor. At the very least, this Valkyrie had descended to the mortal world 3 times before, and had slaughtered 3 super dragons, and then killed hundreds of adult dragons along the way. In the eyes of the world, as long as it was a dragon, there was no dragon that he could not kill. As an outstanding hunter, before hunting a large prey, the first thing to do is to observe its habits, weaknesses, and personality. These days, Basra seemed to be strolling around, but in reality, he was observing his opponent's weaknesses. It's just that he doesn't make a move, but when he does, he will definitely kill without mercy. This was the evaluation of the veteran hunter, Lomans. Basra, who pursued hunting dragons for his entire life, was undoubtedly an idol in the eyes of ace hunters like Lomans. These days, this fugitive, escaped from prison, was willing to hide from the guards and guards, just to put on a hood and look at his idol from afar. And this kind of peeping naturally couldn't escape the sensitive senses of Basra. What was surprising was that the rumored bloodthirsty Longtu was actually very easy to get along with, and even took the initiative to chat with Lomans. When Lomans asked his idol for some hunting techniques, he even gave him some pointers. When Lomans asked for the reason, he replied like this: "Heh, I can feel the cries of the beasts in your hands before they die. We are the same, so why would I be stingy? It's a pity that you aren't an elven ranger, nor do you know how to use a bow. Otherwise, I could teach you a few tricks of the dragon slayer. The younger generation nowadays is too weak, and there are far too few who actively challenge strong prey like you. Those cockroach-like lizards that lay eggs everywhere are about to go extinct." Saying that the dragon slayer was like a periodic extinction, this casual tone made Lomans deeply feel the strength of this Valkyrie and the bone-piercing hatred he had for dragons. This wasn't the only time the gentleman met with Basra. "It's a pity, I missed half of it," that dragon slayer who suddenly appeared as if he was just passing by, casually glanced at him and sighed, almost scaring Bayfong to death. The pitiful draken hunter was just strolling around the alleyway as if he was taking a daily stroll when he was stopped by the Valkyrie who smelled the scent of dragons. If it wasn't for the fact that most gods and mortals viewed draconians as a type of demi-humans and not descendants of dragons, Bayfong might have died on the spot. "What a pity." This was what I casually said after I learned about this. But the moment I said this, I noticed that everyone around me was nodding in agreement. But the 9-headed dragon Emperor Hydra is a god's pet. Patricia had Longtu come down, who won't show any mercy at all. Does she intend to directly start a war with Lady Storm? Indeed, there was no need to doubt his abilities. However, I had the same conclusion as Dasos and the others. Basra definitely wouldn't show any mercy. That was the main problem. As long as he attacks, no matter if he wins or loses, the war will immediately escalate. We need to hurry. For me, every battle and the time after a battle was precious. Actual combat was the most direct and truest way to test one's abilities. No matter how beautiful or powerful one's natural talent or combat techniques were, it would always make one feel uneasy if they weren't tested in actual combat. As for me, I was used to summarizing my gains and losses after a battle. I would also write down everything I learned in my journal. Of course, the most important thing was to discover and make up for my weaknesses. Although this battle didn't last long, my opponent wasn't weak. After all, he was a saint-rank undead mage. If I wasn't careful, it was indeed possible that I would die at his hands. Fine, I admit that I was wrong. The more I understood my junior Lich, the more I felt that it was impossible for me to lose to him. Even if I didn't succeed in defeating him, it would most likely be a protracted battle. In the end, it would still be us, who were the weaker ones, who obtained victory. Was it contradictory that the weaker one would definitely win? Actually, It wasn't contradictory at all. Calasin's extreme lack of combat experience was only a part of the reason. His rotten and twisted soul was the main reason why it was impossible for him to win. A real world? This soul world sounds quite nice. What effects does it have? As an undead mage who specialized in instant death magic, Calasin's soul imprint increased the effects of instant death. There was nothing special about it. However, I heard that he had a soul world. Not only that, it was a rare item that didn't simply increase one's stats, which astonished me greatly. The soul world of most Saint rank mags was only a simple modification of the surrounding environment to make it the most suitable environment for them to use their combat strength. For example, fire mags could transform the surrounding environment into a fire elemental plane. Although this would greatly increase the power of fire magic, it would consume a lot of energy in practical use, which would result in a low-cost performance ratio. Normal soul worlds were often used for large-scale battles or for several mags of the same element to fight together. The stacking of stats would allow one to turn a ring of ice into a blizzard, which would be quite frightening. On the other hand, unconventional soul worlds were the embodiment of one's personal experience and soul. Although there were thousands of differences in power, being able to modify the world with one's own will was enough to prove that one's willpower and determination were extraordinary. Furthermore, such soul worlds were often difficult to deal with and defend against. Having a special soul world was basically the privilege and status symbol of the strongest. I heard that Calasin actually had a soul world named a real world. While I was curious about it, I also raised my evaluation of this junior of mine, which had already reached rock bottom. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable. Does that soul world have any effects? Why didn't you use it back then? Hehe. It's not that good. It's just a little bit of my personal obsession. It's like this: after listening to Calasin's explanation, I directly lowered my evaluation of his soul world. This time, it wasn't a rock-bottom evaluation, but a basement evaluation. After listening to his introduction, Heloise emphasized to Calasin that he mustn't say that he was his master. The reason? This soul world really made me speechless. Changing the gender of everyone within a certain range? What's the point of that? Can't you do something more serious? For example, seriously planning a coup d'état and an undead calamity. If you were slightly more normal, you would have long overthrown your older brother. But this is the deepest desire in the depths of my heart. And isn't a soul world a representation of the desire in the depths of my heart? Alright. Although Calasin's expression was sullen and his tone lacked confidence, his understanding of a soul world wasn't wrong. The next moment, as if recalling something, Calasin's voice became delighted. Moreover, I've used this imagined world twice, and I've successfully taken down extremely difficult opponents. One of them was even a myth-rank expert. Hearing this, I was a little speechless. Indeed, not every man would be able to remain calm when he suddenly realized that he had 2 extra pieces of meat on his chest and that his little brother had disappeared without a trace. Being distracted in a tense battle was equivalent to seeking death. However, for a powerful expert to die because he was distracted looking at his crotch, it was too embarrassing. Thinking about what would have happened if he had suddenly activated this soul world during the battle, I couldn't help but shiver. Definitely don't use this soul world. Right, also, don't tell anyone about this soul world, especially Kolos. I didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Kolos were to know about this soul world. That female elf Druil? Is she of the same species as me? That's great. I have long wanted to find someone to interact with. Alright, Lord, don't stare at me, I will do as you say. However, some things couldn't be avoided. What would come would come. The meeting between Calasin and the gentleman still came. Furthermore, the moment they met, sparks flew. You still like adult men because you have yet to meet a Shota that you truly love. Age? That has never been a problem. A certain grey elf said. You still like females because you have yet to meet a man that you truly love. Gender? That has never been a problem. A certain Lich said. You still like humans because you have yet to meet a life that you truly love. Species? That has never been a problem. This person that everyone knew. The three of them shook hands and an indescribable resonance formed between the three of them, forming a friendship exclusive to gentlemen. Knowing each other and understanding each other, the friendship between gentlemen came so quickly. Comrades. Brothers. Sisters. The grey elves and Lich looked at each other. While appreciating each other, they both bowed to the third person at the same time. Big Brother Bayfoam. Boss Draken. Yes, if there were levels to gentlemen, then Bayfoam's demeanor as the unit of measurement of gentleman shows his status as the leader of the gentlemen. We are all people who disregard illusions and face and wholeheartedly pursue the true love. There's no need to be so polite. I am not alone. From now on, let us call each other brother and sister. Even if the world can't understand our pursuit of true love, at least we can understand each other. Little brother, little sister, what do you say? All right. I am 67 this year, so I will send second sister. I may be 235, but I am still the third sister. All right, I won't comment on why there are two younger sisters. Also, I won't comment on how Momo, who is the oldest, is the third sister. Obviously, their arrangement of becoming sworn brothers isn't based on age but based on gentleman's level. When the three pairs of hands shook hands, when a certain Draken became the leader of the three siblings, when the three siblings of true love were born, the eyes of the others in the room were blinded. I can't take it anymore. My corium or dog eyes. Some people covered their eyes and rolled on the floor. Don't stop me, let me kill her. The glory of Sulphur City's town security cannot be lost in her hands. The one who caught perverts turned into a pervert, the one who found a mummy turned into a mummy. This is too embarrassing. Some people drew their swords in anger. I can't take it anymore. Big brother, I will work hard. One day, I will also find my true love. Some people were moved by the sworn brothers in front of them and their blood surged. If true love is an inanimate object, will it work too? Some people didn't join in due to their pride, but upon seeing this scene, they were tempted. Stop, I have had enough of these darn gentlemen. If you dare to mix with them and allow the true love siblings to proliferate, I will really make a move. Some people intended to use force to stop the spread of the Bayfoam virus. Will true love be blood relatives as well? That's not right. I remember that only those within 3 generations can be considered blood relatives. We are the first, second, third generation. I have already forgotten the genealogy. Anyway, it has been many generations and there is no obstruction at all. Hee. Some people were secretly laughing to themselves. To actually laugh foolishly for no reason, and even counting with her fingers. Looks like under Roland's influence, Renee's etiquette is completely gone. She is getting crazier and crazier. Why is she behaving like a princess of a country? Looks like I have to give her supplementary lessons when I get back. Some people were secretly worried about the princess who was getting weirder and weirder. And right now, I deeply regretted fulfilling my promise so quickly and creating a physical body for Callison, which led to the birth of the true love siblings. Yep, perhaps she should now be called Rosemary, the name he came up with. On the day that I received Desoza's malicious invitation to the enthronement ceremony, I unhesitatingly started creating a physical body for Rosemary. This seemingly beautiful female body also contained my malicious intentions. Her appearance was based on Empress Victoria, who had gone through the historical verification. Amidst it was a combination of the androgynous beauty of Kolos and many others. Coupled with her unnaturally seductive and mature curves, Rosemary's own research on female behavior was a perfect performance. It was definitely a masterpiece. Furthermore, it could be said that it was tailor-made for a certain someone's interests in women. At the very least, when Rosemary appeared, the young lads of the Donglan Royal Knight Order were all stunned. The young knight of the Ottoman White Wolf Guard almost dropped the sword in his hand. Judging from the fervent gazes of the men staring at Rosemary, my craftsmanship hadn't deteriorated at all. As for myself, when you pieced mud bit by bit into a doll and used meat to piece together a humanoid doll, how could you possibly have any interest in a doll? At this moment, I was sitting in the carriage and looking at the super beauty sitting opposite me. I viciously imagined Desoza's panicked expression to vent my frustration at having to wear a dress again. Wait, let's stop for a moment. Seeing that it was still early, I was curious about the scenery by the roadside. Under my request, the Ottoman royal family's reception carriage slowed down. By the roadside, there was a group of poor beggars. They stared at our carriage, which bore the emblem of the Ottoman royal family. I could feel a bone-piercing hatred beneath their expressionless faces. They are just lowly commoners of the docks. Your Highness, there's nothing to see here. In this enthronement ceremony, there are the world's top singing and dancing troupes and circus troupes. Nodding my head thoughtfully, I pulled down the curtains of the carriage and let the carriage continue moving forward. Along the way, we had already met such refugees 4 to 5 times. Obviously, as the war of attrition between the seafolk continued, more and more refugees would appear. Perhaps, the Ottoman nobles who were busy with the enthronement ceremony were just like the White Wolf Knight who had a face full of disdain, completely ignoring these unlucky people. On the other hand, the carriages which were moving in the opposite direction from us caused even more congestion. More and more citizens realized that the situation wasn't right and there were more and more of them escaping. The commoners wouldn't care about the balance of the war. They only knew that their homes and lives were being threatened. On the other hand, the nobles and knight were busy with the so-called enthronement ceremony, completely ignoring the pleas for help from the lower echelons. Even though it was just a small matter, it was enough to show the current tense situation and the problems within Kajisi city. At the very least, the originally high popularity of the new emperor was almost gone. Without a doubt, this had shaken his foundation as a ruler. It is impossible for Dasos to not see it, but he still didn't do anything. Looks like he is intending to use the enthronement ceremony as an opportunity to stake all of his cards and make a huge gamble. Making a huge gamble under the premise that he lacks sufficient understanding of the seafolk? I don't think so. Looks like it's time for us to retreat. Chapter 111. As the carriage slowly advanced on the road, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the sky. Dark clouds gathered and the sky darkened. The next moment, rain began to fall. Torrential rain in summer came and went quickly. One moment it was drizzling, and the next moment it was a torrential downpour. The raindrops clattered against the roof of the carriage, and everything outside the carriage was a blur. The dark clouds and torrential rain made the day seem like night. Even though it's only summer, it's already been raining for 3 consecutive days this week. It's been raining quite frequently recently. It seems that Dasos's luck is truly terrible. Judging from the dark clouds hanging low in the sky, it seemed that the rain wouldn't stop anytime soon. Obviously, it would directly affect the enthronement ceremony. Such a heavy rain was extremely unsuitable for large-scale ceremonies. Did they not make any preparations beforehand? The court mags aren't useless either. In this world with magic, although there were many shortcomings, certain aspects were far superior to a technological world. For example, when it came to predicting and controlling the weather, experienced hunters and rangers could predict the nearest weather from the shape of the clouds. Druil, who was close to nature, could sniff out impending natural disasters from the wind. Mags could use large-scale magic to control and choose the weather they wanted. Today, before I left, I asked Kolos about the weather. I still remembered her hesitant expression when she answered me. It should be sunny, but recently my predictions have been wrong. Even though I feel like it should be sunny for the next week, it's always raining. And I don't feel anyone else interfering. It's either my predictions are wrong, or the person interfering is far stronger than me. It would be understandable if it was someone else who made a wrong prediction, but Kolos was a druil who specialized in summoning storms. For her to make a wrong prediction would be as inconceivable as burning herself with a fire spell. On a normal day, it wouldn't matter if the weather was wrong, but since there was a group of seafolk living by the riverside, it would be a huge problem. The consecutive days of torrential rain had caused many flooded areas of the river to rise again, giving the seafolk more space to move around. On rainy days, when it was inconvenient for humans, the seafolk actually returned to their home turf, greatly increasing their combat strength. Thus, every time it rained, the guards along the coast would be on high alert. Fortunately, the sea race didn't seem to have any plans to attack during the rain. The mags of the Ottoman Empire aren't useless either. They wouldn't allow the rain to disrupt the scheduled ceremony. There's only one explanation for this: the recent rain isn't just a natural phenomenon, but the culprit behind it is far stronger than the mags of the Ottoman Empire. Such a powerful existence naturally wouldn't do something unimportant. He must have a reason for spending so much effort to change the weather. The carriage's sudden stop and change direction surprised me. Could it be that Dasos would change his plans just because it was raining? Why did it change direction? Where do we go now? Are we going back? Hearing my doubts, the White Wolf Knight leading the team hurriedly explained. Changing the route during the rain is a set procedure for the ceremony. In order to deal with the possibility of heavy rain, we have prepared 2 venues. One of them is an open-air plaza at the Ottoman Grand Square while the other is at the Royal Arena. That place has already been sealed off, making it an indoor venue. If it was anyone else who heard the reply, they would probably be impressed by the Ottoman royal family's thorough preparations. However, I could hear the helplessness and weakness of a certain emperor. Without a doubt, ascending to the throne under the eyes and blessings of the citizens, followed by a celebration and performance together with the citizens, was the best choice to win the hearts of the people. Now that it was changed to an indoor venue, it could only mean that the situation had gone out of control. The road leading to the Royal Arena wasn't easy to travel on. Other than the dissatisfied faces of the citizens along the way, the horses that were rushing in from all directions were creating a constant jam. When 2 carriages met, the one who walked in front to give way wasn't determined by the location of the carriage, but by the rank of the guests. Obviously, the princess of a small country wasn't that high up in the hierarchy. Since I was attending the ceremony as an individual, I wasn't the ambassador of the alliance who had to arrive in advance. In the end, due to the jam and giving way, the 20-minute journey took almost an hour. By the time we finally arrived, the place was already jammed to the point where not even a drop of water could trickle through. There were no more places for carriages to park around the arena. Left with no other choice, we could only lift our skirts and walk on the muddy ground. Every time we stepped on the mud, it made me even angrier. The only thing that made me happy was the performance of the accompanying female official, Rosemary. She was indeed a rare masterpiece of mine in recent times. Other than the royal knight who kept sneaking glances at her, the young men who bumped into the wall along the way used their actions to prove Rosemary's charm. Her exquisite face was charming and gorgeous. She had an oval face and a willow waist. Her alluring curves constantly exuded the charm of a mature woman. However, those clear eyes under her phoenix eyes didn't lose any of her purity. Her short blonde hair was combed into a cute little braid. The occasional manly movements made her seem even more youthful and lively, making her look even cuter. Her contradictory beauty brought about a complicated temperament. In the eyes of the men, her temperament constantly changed as she moved and spoke. Sometimes, she was a young married woman, sometimes, she was an 18-year-old girl, sometimes, she was young and pure, and sometimes, she was seductive and luxurious. Every man could find the appearance of their dream lover. Artenaya. The true name of the goddess of beauty was constantly repeated. In the eyes of the crowd, this extraordinary beauty wasn't on a level that ordinary people could reach. Compared to a real flower, a fake flower made of plastic was even more exquisite and perfect. As the work of my meticulous carving, Rosemary, who had the advantages of countless beauties, was definitely the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Nature's creations were the accumulation of coincidences. While coincidences could give people pleasant surprises, they would also often bring about flaws. Rosemary's perfect beauty wasn't something that ordinary people could possess. She was a combination of the best parts of countless beauties, finally achieving a harmonious and perfect creation. She was indeed a fake flower, but she was a perfect flower that could suppress all other flowers. She was the ultimate creation that natural selection couldn't produce. Ayo, speaking of this, why did I suddenly recall the plastic surgery industry of a certain country that they were so proud of? It was said that their mass-produced celebrities wouldn't debut without plastic surgery. Many celebrities didn't look like their children at all, causing many disputes. Getting back to the main topic, originally, I only wanted to make a woman that could charm Dasos to take revenge on him. However, as a necromancer who was responsible for his own creations, when I wholeheartedly threw myself into creation, my world-destroying talent in creation came into play once again. The result of pursuing too much perfection was that I accidentally overdid it once again. Artanaya. I think it should be Pandora. No man would be able to reject the request of such a woman. That would be really troublesome. However, that bunch of gentlemen seemed to have completely ignored Rosemary's beauty. As expected, gentlemen's sense of beauty was different from others. In my eyes, beauties had always been trouble, and this kind of super beauty was a huge trouble. Countless myths, legends, and historical stories proved this point of view. However, I realized that I had overdone it once again, forcefully creating a perfect woman that could bring disaster to a country. Thus, I decided to leave him in the Ottoman Empire without any hesitation. Since his phylactery is in my hands, I don't have to be afraid of him playing any tricks. I'll just send him out to bring disaster to others. Hee, Dasos, accept your unavoidable fate. I cursed viciously with resentment. Then, with tears in my eyes, I looked at the new achievement that I received before I left. Mommy, why is this brother wearing a skirt? Ah, don't look. Hurry up and leave. When the system notification popped up this time, that simulated child's voice almost scared me to the point that my heart nearly stopped. I thought that I had really been exposed. Ding. Congratulations on appearing in public while wearing female clothing for the third time. You have received the hidden achievement, Man in a Skirt. You have been given the honorary title, Head of the Men's Club. After equipping this title, all creatures that look like females, including traps, tomboys, transvestites, and other creatures of unknown gender, will have their friendliness towards you greatly increase. Their wariness towards you will also be lowered, and the possibility of love will be greatly reduced. This title is automatically bound to the King of Gentlemen title, and it will be activated at the same time. He isn't bad. I feel that I can tell him anything, and he is really suitable as a sister and a close friend. However, as a love partner, it feels a little weird. I probably don't see him as a man. System notice, I didn't expect you to discover such a hidden achievement. As expected of the great King of Gentlemen. Repeat after me, it isn't wrong to wear female clothing, but it is wrong to not be beautiful enough when wearing female clothing. I am the great king of female clothing, Lord St. Roland. Oh yeah. Actually, I'm already numb to gentlemanly things to the point that I'm a little indifferent to them. However, that the possibility of love being born is greatly reduced is an actual curse of misfortune. It makes this former veteran member who has died, a super long-distance relationship where having a girlfriend is equivalent to not having a girlfriend, feel the urge to squat in a corner and draw circles. Ding. Let me add one more thing. Abnormal people, gentlemen, will ignore this side effect. So, enjoy the sincere feelings between gentlemen to your heart's content. Right, if you don't want to be dismembered, and for the sake of world peace, please be careful not to be caught in the act of adultery by the demon queen who is getting sicker and sicker. Unrelated to world peace. Who knows, she might descend in her true form in a fit of rage. If that happens, there will definitely be a god war, and a world war will break out. You still dare to say that your love life has nothing to do with world peace? Lord Yongye? Rosemary's soft question jolts me out of my reverie. Even though the royal attendant beside me is staring at me in a daze for a long time, he still maintains his smile and etiquette. Lord, His Majesty invites you to the VIP lounge for a discussion. What was meant to come still came. I don't think that Dasos invited me here just to observe the ceremony. Under the attendant's guidance, I soon arrived at the VIP lounge. Today's main character, who is adorned with countless decorations and looks like a Christmas tree, His Majesty, Emperor Dasos I of the Ottoman Empire. This is Rosemary, my maid. My malicious introduction, Rosemary's flirtatious gesture of lifting her skirt and her perfect smile, didn't receive the response he deserved. After perfunctorily nodding his head, that bastard still glared at me. You are still as beautiful as ever. I trust that you have been well since we last met. I miss you so much. All right then, that one sentence caused me to have the urge to draw my sword and kill him. From a certain standpoint, this is another type of ability. To be honest, my current appearance is exactly the same as Renee's. The young Renee is obviously late in puberty, which is why there is room for me, who has reverted back to my boyish stage, to impersonate her. With such an appearance and an aircraft-like body that doesn't have any curves to speak of, it would be a stretch to say that she is cute. But to say that she is beautiful is either a lie to make people happy, or the person who said it is truly blind. This bastard can't be a gay lolicon, right? Fart. Behind me, Rosemary immediately bursts into laughter upon hearing my nephew's praise. Although she hurriedly covers her mouth, it's probably too late. A maid being so rude is the equivalent of His Majesty the Emperor being laughed at. Dasos, who has been quite angry recently, instinctively reaches for his sword. But when he sees me blocking in front of the maid and frowning in dissatisfaction, he hurriedly adds, "I'm talking about this aura of a conqueror, not your figure. Actually, your figure is quite good, considering your age." Daso's voice gets softer and softer as he uses his actions to hide what he meant by death. However, since I am not a female, I am actually slightly happy that he says that I don't have a figure. But, what kind of figure does a man have? Did something go wrong somewhere? Was it wrong from the very start? I can only keep my angry roar in my heart. After a while, I suppressed my anger and asked, "Why are you looking for me? You should be very busy right now, so just say it." Your Highness Roland, are you willing to become the Empress of the Ottoman Empire? I won't interfere with your private life after marriage. If you are willing to merge the two countries, I will give the Donglan Principality the highest level of autonomy, allowing it to become the wealthiest and most peaceful region in the Ottoman Empire. I refuse. I squeeze these words out from the gaps of my teeth. I am filled with anger, but I can't do anything about it. It really makes me feel sullen. I am seriously considering if I should find a priest of the god of fate to change my luck, even if there is an 80% chance that they are using the name of the god of fate to scam money. I know that you are worried that the Ottoman Empire will take this opportunity to swallow up the Donglan Principality. How about this? You can temporarily entrust the royal power to someone trustworthy, and wait for our second child to be born. Enough. There is a limit to my patience, so stop insulting me. My angry roar caused Dasos to swallow back the rest of his words. Looking at my angry face, he finally shakes his head and asks for help. "Hermit, it is as you said, I can't convince her at all." "Then, you go." I already said, your way of coaxing a little girl is fine, but it is meaningless to a true ruler. Your Highness, since you can't convince me, let's get straight to the point and talk about a deal. Hermit understands my temperament very well, so he didn't waste any words and directly brought up the deal and conditions. It turns out that due to the changes in the situation and the signing of the secret contract, the Ottoman royal family has changed their original goal. That marriage proposal wasn't as simple as it seemed. In their eyes, this wasn't a method to swallow up the Donglan Principality, but a kind of bribe, a bribe aimed at the princess. As long as you are willing to become the Ottoman Empress, you will become the second most powerful person after His Majesty the Emperor. You can touch the women in the harem as you please, as long as you have 2 children of the Ottoman royal bloodline. Dasos himself isn't a person who likes women, so you don't have to worry about him using force. Rather than saying that you are husband and wife, you are more like collaborators. Children? I was so angry that I started laughing, but the other party took it as a sign of loosening up and increased his persuasion. Military power, wealth, beauties, land, as long as you want it, we will be able to satisfy you. Why do you need to focus on some small border country? Agree to this condition, and the entire Ottoman Principality will be yours. Our future is the entire world. As long as you help us, we will conquer everything. Why me? What ability does a princess from the countryside have? At this point, I was so angry that I started laughing. This time, the one who replied was Dasos himself. Don't belittle yourself. Who would dare to look down on the twin stars of the mist bloodline? Besides, just the talent of the tyrant and the bloodline of the angel that can unlock the Scarlet Conqueror to the final stage is worth us betting on. What does a Donglan amount to? This continent is so vast, waiting for us to discover and conquer it. Furthermore, don't say that I am a little unreliable, but my instincts tell me that if we want to conquer this continent, you are absolutely indispensable. Your true potential and abilities are definitely not as much as what you have shown. Alright, these are all excuses, reasons to convince myself. I have taken a liking to you, and I feel that you are the most suitable empress for me. Marry me. Together, with the entire Ottoman Empire as our foundation, we will conquer the entire world and bring an order that belongs to us to Ashi. Without a doubt, this is a kind of bribe. If the one staying here was really the princess of a small country, rather than returning to her impoverished country and fighting for the fate of her country in the land of ice, becoming the empress of a large country is undoubtedly a much better choice. Furthermore, if the one he is trying to convince is a 14-year-old girl, the chances of success are even higher. However, he was wrong from the start. This is definitely not on my list of choices. Lord, can I laugh? I really can't take it anymore. Rosemary, who is disguised as a maid, has a calm expression on her face, but from my phylactery, she is trying to stifle her laughter. Hold it in. Should I say that as expected of the legendary king of winter wolves? This bizarre intuition of his really saw through part of my disguise. However, the problem is that he was ridiculously wrong from the start. I still refuse. If I want something, I will take it myself. I don't even want to consider this foolish marriage alliance. Furthermore, your marriage proposal today is a mistake. In the future, you might regret it. I, Dasos, will never regret it. Alright, this time, it is my turn to try my best to stifle my laughter. The last time, the one who said never regret it was the old Lion King. However, his ending wasn't good. I reckon that he probably regretted it in the end. As for Dasos, no matter how I look at it, it is a tragedy. Thinking about this, my mood suddenly becomes better and I smile playfully. Mph, I look forward to that day. Who knows, 10 years after the secret agreement expires, there might be a day where we fight. Dasos finally knew that his bribe plan and proposal had completely failed. After letting out a sigh, he pretended to be relaxed and shrugged. Just as he was about to say something, the door of the VIP room was opened. Who is it? Didn't I say that no one is allowed to enter? The angry roar of the emperor causes the person who enters to tremble. However, recalling the intelligence that he just received, the royal attendant hurries to the emperor's ear and whispers something to him. Even though he is whispering, my ears have always been sharp since I am not too far away from him. The flood suddenly rose again. The sea folk have come ashore and the defensive line along the river has been breached. Lord Basra and the nine-headed dragon have suddenly started fighting. Before the ceremony even started, the situation in Kajisi City, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, has gone out of control. The war has already broken out. Chapter 112. AD 1897, the summer of the Year of the Griffin, was destined to be remembered by many. No matter if it was the start of the Eternal Holy War, the start of the Seafolk's rise to the stage of history, or the birth of the City of Rain, Falohi, it was remembered by the later generations. After all, there were too many major events that happened in this year. From the start, everyone, including me, underestimated the Seafolk, and even more so, underestimated the Lady Storm and the water elemental god behind them. The most important thing to make an accurate judgment was to obtain comprehensive and accurate information. However, the people on the surface had too little understanding of the Seafolk. At the start of the Seafolk's invasion, even the most brilliant strategist could only make a conservative judgment based on past experience and history. It should only be a small-scale war. Or perhaps, it can't even be called a war. It should just be an attack on the coastal cities. After all, they can't even go ashore, nor can they occupy our land. Could it be that killing all the creatures on the surface would be considered a victory? This kind of war is meaningless. As long as the Seafolk are intelligent creatures, as long as our living space can't overlap, they can't go ashore, and we can't enter the water, then an all-out war between us is meaningless and impossible to happen. Wars between countries and races are usually for the sake of benefits. No matter if it's a fight for living space, land, and resources, or just for the grudges of the leaders, the hearts of the people, or the long-cherished wishes of the military, war can break out. However, if the war is destined to not have enough benefits, or if the cost is obviously greater than the return, then the possibility of such a meaningless war breaking out is so low that it can be ignored. The Seafolk can't stay on the surface for long. They are just cannon fodder forced to go ashore by the evil god Lady Storm. As long as the war drags on, they will retreat sooner or later. In this world, even the decisions of the gods can't be absolute. The gods are high above and accept the beliefs of the various races. They also protect their believers according to their divine domain and divine concept. However, if they force everyone to throw themselves into a war where they are 100% certain to die but are destined to get nothing out of it, then perhaps it would be good if they just disobeyed the gods on the surface. It's even possible for them to abandon the gods' beliefs and find a new god. After all, this was not an absolute world completely ruled by a monotheistic religion. Many gods were originally mortals, and the distance between gods and mortals was not that far. Gods needed the faith and support of mortals, and the weak mortal races also needed the protection of gods. This was also the main reason why the Ottoman Empire would make such a passive and delaying decision. Even the royal strategists patted their chests and used their lives to guarantee that the Sea Folk's attack was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. It was only the beginning of the Holy War. As the strategists repeatedly emphasized that the Sea Folk were not ambitious enough and that they were actually wary of the evil gods of chaos that forced them to come ashore, most of the Ottoman Empire's higher-ups ignored the threat before them. Instead, they were still ambitious enough to invest their energy into scheming against their own people, vassal states. However, in reality, due to a portion of the sea tribe being able to go ashore and almost none of the surface tribe being able to enter the water, the intelligence of both parties is not equal. Furthermore, Tracy, who has left the sea region for several months, does not know that due to the revival of the water elemental god, the entire sea tribe world has undergone an earth-shattering change. This might have to be explained from the living environment of the sea race. In reality, even though the sea is incomparably vast, with seemingly endless resources and living space, even though the combat strength of the seafolk is not low, the life of the seafolk is actually much more miserable than that of the surface tribe. The deep sea is extremely dangerous. Not to mention the fatal low temperature and water pressure, those inestimable giant sea monsters are the true rulers of the sea. Being only able to make a living in the shallow sea of the continental shelf, the space that the seafolk can live in is really limited. Furthermore, the limited space they have to live in has caused them to face a very real problem: food is always insufficient. There are countless schools of fish in the sea. However, in reality, it is extremely unreliable to rely on the heavens to make a living. There are indeed many schools of fish, but most of them have owners. Previously, it was mentioned that one cannot go to the deep sea. However, in reality, the fishing resources in the shallow sea are extremely limited. Furthermore, after the farming industry in the sea turned into a joke and relying solely on hunting to sustain their daily lives, the seafolk, in order to maintain sufficient fishing resources in the surroundings of their residence, turned to herding fishes as their only choice. Thus, herding fishes has a long tradition. The fishing resources determine the number of members of the seafolk. The number and strength of the seafolk determines the size of the territory they can occupy to provide for the growth of their own fishes. Herbivorous fishes chase after seaweed and seaweed, while carnivorous fishes chase after other fishes. Just like herding on the surface, artificial herding underwater would still cause the natural balance of the area to be destroyed. When a negative growth of the fishes appears, migration is unavoidable. The fishes and the seafolk would consume the basic resources of that area. The larger the tribe, the shorter the migration period. In a sense, they were like the centaurs, a nomadic tribe. The only difference was that the centaurs herded cattle and sheep and chased after aquatic plants, while the seafolk herded fish and chased after the tides. The songs and talents of the sirens and mermaids to summon fishes seem extremely magical. However, they are only tools for herding fishes. There is not much difference from the flutes and whistles of shepherds. Only their own fishes and ocean companions will respond to their summons. Herding fishes sounds fantastical and beautiful. However, in reality, it is a hard job. Chasing the tides and seaweed requires a lot of experience. Furthermore, the dangers of migration are even greater. No one knows if they will encounter sea monsters or hostile tribes at the next migration point. If they are unlucky and suffer heavy losses after several migrations, it will be time for the tribe to disband. On the other hand, the nomadic tribes are naturally aggressive, causing many tribes to work as mercenaries or even bandits themselves. However, on the other hand, the nomadic way of survival is destined to prevent the birth of a relatively centralized feudal country. This is because once the number of people in a tribe reaches a certain level, in order to fight for living space and limited resources, the tribe will definitely disband. If there is no capital, there is no limit to the size of the territory. How can a feudal country based on land enfeoffment be born? The few large and medium-sized gathering points in the shallow sea that are rich in resources all have a limit on the number of resident tribes. Every once in a while, they have to rotate. Only the strongest tribe can obtain a relatively comfortable life after winning the tribal competition. No one can guarantee that they will not meet with an unstoppable disaster the next time they migrate. A relatively stable and settled life is the desire of the sea folk from the bottom of their hearts. It is also the root cause of their jealousy and even hatred towards the tribes on the surface. Why do those weak and timid creatures on the surface have a happy and stable daily life, while we don't even know where we will be tomorrow? Speaking of this, since there must be benefits and reasons for a war, to make the extremely realistic sea folk fight to the death as cannon fodder, the benefits offered by the water elemental goddess Alos and Lady Storm are very obvious. A capital, a stepping stone to the new world, a holy land in the eyes of all the sea folk. And after the capital is confirmed, it will be a kingdom that belongs to the sea folk. It is true that the sea folk cannot live without water and are unable to go ashore for a long period of time. However, if the land is constantly raining and there is always a few meters of water on the ground, then the sea folk will be able to live freely in the water city. They only need to reserve a part of the dry land outside the city as farmland and enslave the tribes on the surface as farmers. Then, there is the possibility of the birth of a kingdom that belongs to the sea folk. Is it inconceivable? However, in this world of magic and true gods, everything is possible. Storms and thunderstorms are the divine concepts of the sea folk's goddess of protection, Lady Storm. Furthermore, the water elemental goddess Alos is a super expert in playing with water. Only they can build a rain city that circulates automatically. In the original history, the revived ancient elemental gods are the first batch of world bosses. Each of them is an existence close to that of a true god, which is obviously beyond the ability of the players to deal with. Thus, the omnipotent game manager arranged a series of plot killings, causing these unlucky people who just woke up to die tragically in the hands of the natives and the heroes chosen by fate, making their subordinate elemental creatures become the heroes to practice their skills. There is still a difference between the real world and the simulated virtual game. In this world, there is no super god named Game Manager. If those noobs who are only a few or 10 levels really meet the weak ancient elemental gods that just revived, they might not be able to kill the god to prove their Tao, but rather, they will have to offer their bodies and souls as tonics. Thus, other than the unlucky fire elemental god, the other released elemental gods have already begun to recover from their long hibernation period. How can they, who were once all-powerful, be willing to be forgotten by others? It's fine if they don't make a move, but if they make a move, it will definitely change everything. Some of the plots in the walkthrough were wrong from the very beginning. History and fate were off track from the very start. Before the huge benefits of completely changing the fates of themselves and their descendants, the sea folk's attack is no longer a small skirmish like in the history. It is an all-out war, a war of annihilation and invasion. The Ottoman Empire, who has neglected the determination and strength of the other party, is still dreaming of becoming a super empire, completely unaware that the disaster is already at its doorstep. At this moment, a grand ceremony is being held on the surface. Actually, a ceremony is also being held underwater, and the scale is even grander. Somewhere at the bottom of the river in Kajisi City, under the cover of a magical mist, it is a bustling scene. Hundreds of elites from the Seafolk tribe are serving as guards without any complaints. Countless powerful seafolk have gathered here. The arrogant and rude Naga royalty is smiling modestly. The violent and ferocious sea beasts are wearing headgear that prevents them from speaking and chains that restrict their movements. Even the arrogant and bloodthirsty sea giants have put down their rusted anchors that they always carry with them and are trying their best to lower their heads and pretend to be humble. Only an even more powerful and supreme existence can make these powerful beings lower their heads. On top of a huge altar carved from colorful coral, there are 2 thrones, one big and one small, carved with fine jade. The small one is empty, while the other one has an ice beauty with snow-white skin sitting on it. Her form is half human and half fish. Her upper body is human, but she has a long tail like a sea dragon. Although she appeared petite and beautiful compared to the gigantic altar, she was still taller than even the sturdiest sea giant. She appeared far more luxurious and beautiful than the mermaids of the sea tribe's royal family. And if one looked closely, this beautiful woman with scales and a tail had translucent skin. She really was made of water. Let's begin. The water elemental goddess Alos's voice is clear and cold, but there is an indescribable sense of weakness in it. Her voice isn't loud, but it echoes in the ears of all the sea folk. This isn't magic. It is merely the will of the river water conveying the will of their ruler. This is underwater, her world. She has endless authority and unparalleled power. As Alos' will is conveyed, the ceremony officially begins. With a tap of Alos's white jade-like finger, a door to the void opens. On the other side is the water elemental plane. That is the home of Alos, as well as her kingdom. Countless water elementals rush out. The moment they step onto the altar, they shake and transform into pure water. The coral altar, which is nourished by the water, starts glowing. Middle-sized water elementals, water elemental warlords, water elemental elders, ancient water elementals. One powerful existence after another voluntarily turns into offerings. Elemental creatures never fear death. To them, death is only a way to return to their own world. On the other side, the black-robed seafolk walked up the altar one by one. They were the priests of the Queen of the Storms, and they were able to summon storms and raise waves to engulf ships. They had always had a high status and prestige in the various tribes. At this moment, despite their high status, they are only doing the same thing, walking up the altar, picking up a ritual dagger, stabbing it into their own hearts, and falling down in satisfaction. As these respected storm priests fall down one by one, there is already a shadow on the empty throne. She is only the size of a normal person and is far from being as tall as Alos. However, any seafolk who sees her will definitely tremble and lower their proud heads. As a chaos malevolent god, although she is not well known on the surface, just like her malevolent god colleagues, Lady Storm is also happy to receive the blood sacrifices of her believers. Her will has long descended. Your souls shall enter my god's realm. Your deeds shall be sung by the future generations. The god's clone speaks in a praising tone, causing more black-robed priests to quickly walk up the altar to fight for the chance to sacrifice themselves before the true god. As the sacrifices fall down one by one, the shadow of Lady Storm becomes more and more real. Following the descent of the true god's clone, a powerful storm and thunder appear in the sky above the river. Similar to Alos, the green-skinned Queen of Storms also had the traits of the sea tribe in terms of appearance and physique. When she slowly materialized, the impatient goddess of storms couldn't wait to start the calamity of the surface creatures. Kajisi City. From now on, only the capital of the seafolk, the city of rain, Falohi. My people, use your own hands to seize the kingdom of your dreams. The will of the god is conveyed in the storm. The next moment, the dignified true god clone actually picks up a ritual dagger and stabs it into his own heart. When the will of the clone returns to the main body, it has already turned into a tornado in the midst of the black storm god power. The self-sacrifice of the true god of storm clone will probably cause the strength of the main body to regress by a large margin. However, such a huge gift given right after the start of the holy war is destined to give the order gods a headache. At this moment, the top of the tornado has reached the clouds. A new natural cycle is already being constructed. The will of the water elemental god has already been passed down. I bestow the name of the city of rain, Falohi. Within the boundaries of this city, the rain will never stop. A blade will always accompany the waves. The people of the rain will become the kin of the water. In front of the endless storm, in front of the mighty power of the true god, the boundary between the water and the sky is broken. Countless waves are swept up into the sky to form new rain. A new natural cycle has already been formed. The strange thing is that the flood of the entire city is rising, but the flood of the submerged pier is receding. Very quickly, when all the flood is maintained at around a blade, about 1 meter, the rainstorm is much smaller. With the help of the water elemental Grand Duke, the pale Alos returns to the water elemental plane through the space gate. She, who has overexerted herself, is destined to go into hibernation again. According to the will of the Queen of Storms, go and take back our city. The silent blue sea dragon floats to the surface of the water. The sea giants pick up their heavy anchors. Naga begins to prepare their spells. It has finally begun. On the river, the 9-headed dragon Emperor Hydra, who has been holding back for a long time, steps into the city for the first time, causing the entire city to start trembling. The sudden rise of the flood destroys the barrier. The rainwater and the waist-high flood makes people's vision blurry and unable to move. The Ottoman defenders, who are at a loss due to the strange weather and flood, are about to face the toughest water battle in history. Evil dragon, die. Silver lightning streaks across the sky. The dragon head closest to the 9-headed dragon is actually split open. Green dragon blood spurts out, tainting the surface of the river with a foul stench and poison. Arth, damned butcher. While the mortals are retreating in the face of the aggressive seafolk, the first to declare war is the Valkyrie Basra. Chapter 113. The torrential rain and thunder outside the window could no longer be regarded as the background. Along with the flood came the wrath of the ocean. Humans had occupied the most fertile land for far too long. As the victors of the last holy war, they had a reason to be proud. The seafolk were chased into the pitch-black, cold ocean. The beast men lost their grasslands and plains. The undead hid in the swamps and deserts. Even the kingdom of the elves, which was also the law of order, could only shut up its citizens and live in peace in a corner of the world when faced with the overbearing human kingdom. The losers of the previous holy war and their god of protection had suffered in agony for more than 1,700 years. The long-lived ones who were fortunate enough to survive could still remember how their families and homes were destroyed in the war. They hated and feared war, but also longed for war. They hated the destructive war that took everything away, but they also hoped to return to the homeland that their ancestors had lost. They wanted to vent their hatred and anger in a war of vengeance and reclaim everything that they had lost. The short-lived humans had long since viewed themselves as the core of the world, the beloved of Aishi, the king of all living things. The origin of the beast men, the holy land of Bianluya, the great plains of Bianluya, the fertile black soil of today is said to be able to grow seedlings even if rice is sown, but it is one of the less important parts of the endless territory of the San Antonio Empire. The original owners of the beast men were either killing each other in the underground world or searching for food in the wastelands. Back when the sea tribe was still just an aquatic tribe, they could be found in rivers, lakes, and seas. But now, if the sea tribe appeared in the inland lakes, it was likely that armies would immediately come to annihilate them, and adventurers would come to claim their rewards. The kingdom of the elves, which was supposed to be an ally of the elves, would always be able to find their own kind in the slave market. The border conflicts between the elves and the human kingdoms had never stopped. The once brave knight class had now become the lord knight class. Humans' overly comfortable and relaxed lives compared to other species had given rise to an inexplicable arrogance and pride. As short-lived species, their short-sightedness and forgetfulness made them forget the glory and struggle of their ancestors. They felt that they were the spirit of all creatures, and that all other lives should be their subordinates. Orcs. Weren't they just a bunch of barbarians who couldn't even speak clearly? In the face of our new technology and war machines, these barbarians are nothing. Elves. They're just a bunch of stupid antiques. If there really is a holy war, just 2 of our human superkingdoms would be enough to sweep through all 4 sides. Perhaps we'll become the easiest holy war's victors. The victors of the last holy war were proud of their strength and devoted themselves to scheming against their own kind. The losers, on the other hand, were suffering in agony, waiting patiently for a chance to make a comeback. The 2 sides had completely different battle preparation attitudes, causing the originally victorious order to unknowingly fall into an absolute disadvantage. In the northern wastelands, The earth elemental god and the beast men came together. On a cold night, relying on bonfires to keep warm, the tribe leaders pointed at their dream homeland on the map and loudly roared and cried. The beast men warriors swore a blood oath and prepared for the journey. On the barren island in the south, the black-winged people, who had already become a pirate species, regained the right to fly with the help of the wind elemental god. They activated the ancient floating island, picked up their divine spears, and began a new hunting season. If it wasn't for the fire elemental god that Eliza had eaten as a tonic, the 4 ancient elemental gods would have all been mobilized. The elemental tide would rise wildly throughout the entire plane. Magic, abilities, divine arts, and other supernatural abilities would become much easier to learn. As the origin of elemental magic, the 4 main elemental magic would have an exponential increase in power. At the same time, it would become easier and more frequent to receive visitors from other planes. The elemental gods would become a permanent resident of the main plane. The Chaos Faction's demon army had already begun the latest round of bloody elimination competition. The new army leader would obtain the opportunity to bring demons to harvest the souls of the surface. Perhaps this was only the prelude to the eternal holy war. But if they couldn't even survive the prelude, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was the final battle. As for the Order faction, other than the humans, the second main force should be the elves, who had already split into countless kingdoms, tribes, and tribes. However, more than 100 years ago, the kingdom of the elves had already begun to close off their countries. The long-lived species and the elven gods, who were getting weaker and weaker, had no intention of informing their allies even if they received the warning of the Holy War. After all, they knew that even if they did inform the humans, they would most likely be ignored and mocked by the arrogant humans. You could praise the elves for their beauty, kindness, and intelligence, but never praise them for their magnanimity. That was because in the elven language, forgiveness and forgetfulness were synonymous. For those narrow-minded elves with long ears, thousands of years of accumulated grudges seemed to have happened just yesterday. They had long since decided to stay out of trouble, so it was already good enough that they didn't kick them when they were down. Furthermore, there were rumors that the elven gods had always been in cahoots with the chaos evil gods. It was difficult to ascertain whether the rumors were true or not. However, it was a publicly acknowledged fact that the relationship between the elven gods and the human gods was extremely poor. After all, there would always be some indescribable estrangement between a leader who was past his prime and a leader who was still in power. It was just like watching a popular celebrity from yesterday. Even if they didn't show it on the surface, they would definitely feel all sorts of emotions in their hearts. Alright, getting back to the main topic, the current situation was already laid out before us. The Chaos faction had been sharpening their blades for 1,000 years, while the human empire was still in the midst of internal strife in the midst of peace and prosperity. As long as war were to break out, the outcome of the early stages would already be decided. Looking at the conclusion after that, I personally made the same mistake as the Celestial Tower. They relied too much on prophecy magic while I relied too much on the so-called historical prophecy. Even if that history was a simulation of reality and the earlier part of history was accurate, it didn't mean that the later part would be accurate as well. Other than the butterfly effect that I had on myself, just the fact that there were no other players in the real world meant that everything was destined to be different. In the real world where there were no players blessed by the heavens, it was impossible for the 3 elemental gods to be killed by a random plot. The level of the elemental calamity had far exceeded my expectations. Perhaps, in the entire Holy War and the continent, this could only be considered as an appetizer. However, this war was destined to be even more tragic than the one in the history. Alright, even if I really predicted it, even if I didn't stay in Sulphur Mountain City's prison and sharpen my law skills, I would still be helpless in such an important matter that involved countless powerful gods. The current reality was already the complete opposite of the history. In that history, the 4 elemental gods were destroyed and 3 of them were sealed. The only fire elemental god managed to escape from the underground world and mixed together with the Underground Alliance army that released him, causing the friction between the underground world and the surface world to intensify. In the real world, due to my influence, the originally troublesome fire elemental god was completely eliminated. The other three elemental gods found their own helpers and became the new super troublesome ones. Debating on which history was better was meaningless and worthless. History doesn't have hypotheses, nor does it believe in IFS. There was no possibility of a winner or loser. At this moment, I had to face the storm stirred up by the wings of the butterfly of fate, the huge wave that was stirred up by the water elemental god. Coming out from the VIP lounge, even I, who had experienced countless wars, was shocked by the sight before me. Outside the window was a tornado that covered the sky. It was as though a giant dragon was sucking up water into the sky. The dark clouds maintained a relatively even rainfall, turning the entire city into a city of rain. A miracle. This wasn't a description, it was a judgment based on the current situation. Only divine power could create such a strange phenomenon. Inside the room, the hall on the first floor was in a mess. The flood had already spread into the room. On a temporary platform, the major nobles were urgently contacting their advisors. The moment Dasos walked down, he was surrounded by messengers. Countless mystical light flashed and disappeared. The precious high-level mags became the only reliable messengers. The coastal defense line has been broken through. There are too many sea folk. Those sea giants are impossible to defend against. Court Archmage Anso died in battle. The court mags are beginning to retreat. The White Wolf guards are being surrounded by the sea folk. It's impossible to break through. The road to support has been blocked by refugees. The private soldiers of the nobles are already killing people to clear the way. Bad news fell like snowflakes, but the most worrying thing was the images sent back by the Magi's set up on every street. In one scene, the White Wolf cavalry, the pride of the Ottoman Empire, were surrounded by short murlocs. Their well-bred warhorses could not move an inch in the flood, and the cavalry, who were forced to dismount, had no choice but to remove the micellar mithril alloy that they were so proud of, in order to move in the flood. In the water, the fearless charge that they were so proud of was impossible to carry out. The indestructible violent heavy sword was unable to find a target to attack. It was impossible to throw the explosive javelins in the heavy rain. The dripping White Wolf Guard was unable to catch up to the murlocs swimming in the water. Their heavy armor and weapons became their greatest burden. The powerful White Wolf Guard was fighting a chaotic battle in the flood. Their performance was even worse than a fisherman's. Even though the sound transmitted from the image was very soft, the knight's expression of extreme pain, the blood that appeared on his body, and the sudden appearance of a harpoon on his back explained everything. Wa. Merrily shrieking, the merman popped his head up from the water, but then he lowered his head and dove back into the water, searching for the next chance to attack. The short stature of the murlocs, which was ridiculed by other races in the past, became the best weapon in this flood. The muddy river water made it impossible for the knight to discover the murlocs underwater. On the other side, a sturdy knight was caught in a fishing net and dragged to the ground. Relying on his strong physique and heavy armor, he was entangled in the fishing net and couldn't get up at all. He tore the net with all his might, but he still couldn't open his eyes. In the end, he could only open his eyes wide and strangle his own neck. Just like that, he was drowned to death in the eyes of everyone. That's little Mickey, the youngest Silver Knight of the Guards. His ability to control his steed and charge was the best in the 7th platoon, but he died just like that in the hands of a low-level murloc. Hauke, the strongest knight of the 7th squad, was drowned. My lord, please think of something. At the very least, we can't let everyone die such a worthless death. The angry roar of the White Wolf Knight in the hall made everyone feel inexplicably sad. One of the virtues of a knight was to not fear sacrifice, but at the same time, there was also a rule that said sacrifice must be worthwhile. If one died while charging towards a giant dragon, it would naturally be a kind of honor. However, if one died in the hands of a weak murloc that they looked down on in the past, it would be an insult to a knight. If the powerful White Wolf Guard was already so tragic, then the Ottoman people in the other scenes were even more tragic. A beautiful mermaid was jumping underwater. The pouring rain reminded her of the water curtain waterfall in her hometown. Thus, she caressed the magic shell between her golden hair and sang a song. The mermaid's singing voice was world famous. The beautiful figure in the shell swimsuit was even more charming. However, the warriors present didn't have the mood to appreciate it. That was because along with the Song of Tides, there was a deadly lurker. Piranhas. There are piranhas under the water. The warrior who screamed in pain immediately fell to the ground. After a few seconds, white bones filled with teeth marks floated to the surface of the blood. Jellyfish, poisonous jellyfish. Everyone, get out of the water. The almost transparent and colorless jellyfish in the water were impossible to detect. Even the strongest warrior would be paralyzed to death unknowingly after being touched by those poisonous tentacles that were filled with deadly venom. Swordfish. This warrior was lucky. At the very least, he knew who killed him. The long mouth of the swordfish pierced into his stomach. He didn't even struggle for a few seconds before he fell to the ground and died. Along with the mermaids singing, the seafood delicacies in the restaurant became a deadly hunter. Everyone knew that staying in the water was equivalent to seeking death. However, under the blessing of the two gods' divine power for Rain City, every place in the city was submerged in water. The warriors had nowhere to retreat to. Although there were people who abandoned everything and climbed onto the roofs, judging from the fins of the sharks underwater, it was the same as being trapped in a dangerous place where they couldn't move. What awaited them was still the end of the world. A large number of seafolk entered the city. If the battle between the middle and low-level warriors caused people to sigh helplessly, then the battle between the high-level warriors caused people to despair. Exploding flames, come. A battle mage who specialized in fire summoned the flames he was most proficient in despair. However, before the flames could take shape, a young Nogger clapped her hands together and extinguished the flames. As the incarnation of a water snake spirit, every Nogger more or less knew some water magic. Perhaps on land, she would only be able to quench thirst. However, the waves she created in the water were deadly. Furthermore, she was only an apprentice. The water god and sea god's blessing greatly increased the seafolk's combat strength. The shockwaves created by the sea giants could easily destroy even the sturdiest of fortresses. The seafolk archmages with evil smiles only needed to hide in the water and repeatedly summon huge waves to wash away everything. Furthermore, the elite warriors from several hundred tribes had arrived today. The human warriors were surrounded and killed by the flood. In terms of the number of high-level warriors, the humans didn't have the advantage. Never fight against the seafolk in the water, unless you also have fins and don't need to breathe. It was unknown who said this ancient advice first, but there was only a deathly silence in the hall. What followed after was the faint sound of sobbing. That's right, no one could defeat the seafolk in the water. Just like how I almost died in the fishing nets of a group of fishmen a few days ago. The combat strength of the seafolk in the water was immeasurable. This was also the reason why the two gods went to rest after completing the blessing of Rain City. They believed that there was no need for them to interfere anymore. The development of the situation proved their judgment right. From the moment this city became the home ground of the seafolk, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The Ottoman Empire was destined to lose its most luxurious city, the Pearl City. No one expected that on this joyous day for the Ottoman Empire, the powerful empire would meet with such a calamity. Everyone turned their gazes to Dasos, waiting for his decision. A city wasn't everything to an empire. A vast territory could still form new armies. As long as the people were alive, there would still be hope. The day of vengeance would eventually arrive. Meaningless sacrifices were meaningless. Everyone could see and think about what needed to be done right now. However, the cruel decision would be carried out by the emperor who ascended to the throne today. Abandon the defensive line. Those who can walk, retreat. Leave the city. Shouting these words through gritted teeth, Dasos seemed to have aged 10 years. No. My parents are still at home. Your Majesty, please save them. The cry of alarm from the nobles was only the beginning. My boys are still resisting, how can we give up? This is the most despicable betrayal. The old general roared at the king. His soldiers were dying tragically one by one. Once the retreat began, all of them would become cannon fodder. There was no possibility of survival. Kajisi is the capital. If we lose the capital, What face do we have left to stand on the Asia continent? We will become the laughingstock of the entire world." The old Marquis smiled bitterly. What he said was indeed the truth. The only ones who were smiling in the hall were the small countries that were forced to be subordinate. Even though the envoys were worried about their own safety, they still looked happy. For real diplomats, even if they died, as long as they didn't sign on the humiliating treaty and their descendants wouldn't be shamed for 100 years, it was worth it even if they died on the spot. I said, "Give up." The scarlet demon's sword emitted a blood-like brilliance. The king who held the sword stabbed it into the ground. "Stay in this city and wait for death. Stupid. So what if we lose the White Wolf Guards? We can just rebuild the White Lion Guards and White Tiger Guards. So what if we lose the old capital? Our great Ottoman territory is vast. There are countless cities that are close to Kajisi. We can just choose again. We have indeed lost today. We will remember this hatred. Tomorrow, my army will take back everything." I said, "Retreat. Take away the important things and throw away the useless belongings. Take away all the national treasures. Technical information is prioritized. Children, women, and the elderly are prioritized. Special talents are prioritized. Young men with 4 limbs, pick up your weapons and stand with me. My knight and I will stay until the very last moment." After his anger reached its peak, the Winter Wolf King's tone became abnormally calm. However, his trembling whiskers showed that he was still in a state of rage. The Emperor's calmness and initiative to bring up the rear stabilized the situation at the critical moment. He didn't hesitate to cut his losses and no doubt avoided the most tragic ending. As for me, it was time for me to make a decision. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. You can leave with the first batch of women. No, I should say, please leave with them. Green Wild Bay's Goblin Bank. If you complete the requirements of the contract, you can receive the key there. However, it will have to be at least a month later." I didn't answer the question and didn't speak a single word of truth. I was making the final preparations before leaving, so how could I tell the other party that the key was on me? Leave just like that? Impossible. Little Renee is currently following my request to invite talents from all over. Kolos is currently standing guard at the church, so they are definitely in danger. If I were to escape with the key, not only would my companions on the surface die, even those fellows in the underwater base would starve to death. "You intend to save your companions? Stop joking. The entire city is filled with the sea folk. Even if it is you, fighting with the sea folk in the water is suicidal. A meaningless sacrifice is the shame of a knight." "Heh, suicidal? I don't think so." There was no point in saying anything more. I shook my head and walked down the hall. In a relatively spacious area, I took out my own space bag and searched for my old belongings. Yes, even if it was me, I had no chance of winning against the sea folk in the water. Furthermore, the duration of the War Angel transformation was extremely short. As long as I entered the water, it would be impossible for me to shake off the sea folk's pursuit. It was impossible for me to achieve my goal. However, as long as I had that item, it wasn't impossible. Naturally, I have no chance of winning in the water. However, it might be possible on the ice. I got it. After pouring out a pile of dried plums, marbles, handmade poker cards and other miscellaneous items, I finally found my target. It was a hand-carved short wooden sword. It was only the size of a hand and it was obviously a child's toy sword. The workmanship was rough and there were a few crooked words carved on the hilt of the sword. The words were distorted and childish, as though it was written by a child. Cavendish sword. Roland is not allowed to steal it or play with it. Those words were really written by a child. That was the signature that Cavendish left for his precious wooden sword when he was still a child. When he was young, he was never willing to call me, who was only a few minutes older than him, older brother. Basically, he would just call me by my name. Caressing the marks on the sword, I felt as though I had returned to that warm and carefree childhood. In the midst of war, I saw that reckless and straightforward foolish younger brother. I shook my head. This wasn't the time to reminisce about the past. What I needed wasn't the wooden sword itself but the soul that was sleeping within it. Irene Baylor, I need your help. Chapter 114. The Royal Colosseum was built at a high point, but the ice-cold river water still flowed into the arena unnaturally, changing the natural phenomenon of water flowing to the bottom into water flowing to the bottom. This was almost a modification of the laws of nature. Only the highest controller of the water element could do such a thing. The situation was worsening with every passing moment. I didn't have much time to waste. Irene Baylor, I need your help. I need your strength. The water had already reached my feet, but I was still patiently talking to the wooden sword. Perhaps in the eyes of others, this scene was a little silly, but I knew that this was the only solution. Irene Baylor wasn't the name of a person. Rather, it was a deeply wounded soul, a sleeping beauty who had been in a deep slumber for more than 300 years. My cry for help was clearly heard, but there was no response, like a stone sinking into the ocean. However, I knew that she had already woken up. It was just that she didn't want to respond to my call, or perhaps, she didn't know how to respond to my call. Irene, short for Irene Baylor, there isn't much time left. We have to sign a soul contract as soon as possible. Only with your help can I fight on the surface of the water. A weak voice finally sounded beside my ear. I'm already very tired. Soul creatures didn't have a natural physical body, so how could they have the concept of stamina and fatigue? However, I could understand it. The so-called love doesn't tire was probably the barrier erected by a wounded heart to prevent it from being hurt again. Yes, that's why you have been resting for more than 300 years. If you don't wake up to bask in the sun, you will probably dissipate. This wasn't a lie. For humans, excessive sadness and depression was an extremely dangerous mental illness. For soul creatures whose soul was their physical body, negative emotions were a fatal poison. Who knows, it might be a good thing for me to dissipate. You should know that I don't want to sign a contract with other Knight. That's why I didn't allow Renee and the others to disturb your rest. You should have other choices. Even if you haven't entered the silver rank yet, as long as you send out a contract invitation, those frigid Moor wouldn't reject it. Yes, sleeping within the wooden sword was a frigid Moor. It was the companion of an Aurora Knight in the past. And now, I was trying to poach it to become my mount. What I want isn't a chain that restrains my growth, but a pair of wings that allows me to soar higher. Only you can become my wings and not a shackle that hinders my growth. There were many paths to the top, but to reach the top, one path was enough. The more power, the better. Too much power would lose its purity. I have already made a plan for my own growth. Ice, death, law, and holy light. The 4 main domains are enough for me to study for the rest of my life. The frigid nightmare can indeed increase my combat strength, but it isn't a necessity. Of course, becoming an Aurora Knight would greatly increase my combat strength, which was a good thing for the current me. However, the reason why I had never considered signing a contract with Frigid Moor was because Frigid Moor grew together with the Knight's soul. A mature Frigid Moor would have too many traces of the original Frigid Moor, which would instead restrict my growth. As a soul creature, the newly born Frigid Moor was blank. As the contract Knight grew, its master's memories and emotions would become nutrients for its growth. The master's desire to become stronger would become the driving force for its evolution. It was the most trusted mount and companion of the Knight. From a certain standpoint, analyzing its master's memories and emotions would often be extremely similar to its master's personality. It could be said to be the other half of a soul. Under normal circumstances, although a Frigid Moor that accepted someone else would grow quickly, it would be difficult for it to reach the peak. However, there were always exceptions to everything. The Knight that Irene partnered with in the past had soul waves that were extremely similar to mine. Perhaps, it could even be said to be the exact same. Irene didn't need to make any adjustments at all to be able to completely adapt to my soul. No, if it was that person's Frigid Moor, it would even be able to increase my strength. Of course, finding a new young Frigid Moor would also be able to achieve my goal. However, not mentioning the difficulty of reactivating the altar, even if I managed to obtain a Frigid Moor, I wouldn't be able to wait for it to mature. By the time Frigid Moor truly matured, I probably wouldn't need it anymore. After a period of unbearable silence, what I got in return was still Irene's bitter rejection. I'm very tired and I lack the will to fight. In my current state, I will definitely be a burden to you. To a warrior, lacking the will to fight is equivalent to death. How could I not know this? A warrior who seeks death will die sooner or later. Even though I know that Irene is able to increase my fighting prowess, I have never tried to disturb her sleep. But now, other than her, I can't think of any other way to save the people that I wish to protect in this desperate situation. Can you help me? I need your strength to save my comrades. To a person whose heart is already dead, it is difficult to reason with them. Thus, let's try to talk about feelings and talk about reality. Without your help, not only will I die, the final inheritor of the Mist bloodline will also die. Then, the contract with the Frigid Moor family will be completely severed. Good Irene, regardless of whether it is in consideration of our childhood friendship or the future of the Frigid Moor family, please help me. The spirit of a knight doesn't mean that I won't help someone when they are in danger. As expected, it's still that despicable Roland. Yes, it is despicable, but I know how to say something that the other party can't refuse. A true knight is unable to ignore someone's request for help, and that person is even more so one who can be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. As the other half of his soul and memories, Irene is also unable to ignore my request. Besides, it probably won't be long before that person returns to the mortal plane. Don't you want to ask him why he made such a choice? Why did he abandon you after making such a choice? I know, I've thought it through long ago. In his eyes, the foolish and outdated spirit of a knight isn't enough to give him the strength to take revenge. Being betrayed by a human that he trusted made him feel despair and hurt. His older brother's sacrifice made him swear to take revenge on this despairing world. Thus, he made his choice. Abandoning everything, he answered the call of the abyss and entered hell, hoping to obtain the strength to take revenge. That idiot always goes to extremes, but don't you want to ask him directly? Ask him how he's doing right now. Did he get beaten up in the chaos abyss to the point of crying? Did he often miss home? Did he regret leaving you behind? Did he abandon you because he was afraid that his depravity would corrupt you? Despicable, 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 despicable. Obviously, my last question hit Irene's weak spot. She was flustered and exasperated. The angry little girl doesn't have any technique for swearing at me. Her vocabulary is extremely poor, and she can only repeat despicable over and over again. This is probably the most vicious word in her memory. A little girl who is several hundred years old. It hasn't even been 10 years since Frigid Moor's egg hatched until it went into hibernation again. Even with all the shared memories and knowledge, she has less than 10 years of life experience. If she isn't a little girl, then what is she? However, I seem to have underestimated a little girl's resentment. Your Highness Roland, haven't you always been mocking the knight's virtues of protection and sacrifice? The spirit of mist that His Highness Cavendish believes in is even treated as a joke by you. Based on your personality, when faced with an impossible situation, shouldn't you rationally give up on those chess pieces to preserve your strength? Why did you choose the path of protection that you despise so much at this moment? Yes, Irene is Cavendish's Frigid Moor. This young soul was raised by Cavendish to have a wooden brain just like him. However, after a long hibernation, she, who is still stuck in time 300 years ago, still treats me as the young holy knight prince. Did I really think that way back then? But, it really sounds like what I would say. There's no need to sigh helplessly. Since she asked such a question, I know that she is moved. Back then, I was indeed arrogant, but in the end, I still suffered a crushing defeat. Now that I'm back to square one, Cavendish is walking down my old path, so I intend to stop him. Irene Baylor, come with me. I've hidden many things from you. After the contract, you can take a look at it yourself. If you're dissatisfied, you can cancel the contract. The white light that silently seeped out from the wooden sword is Irene's answer. From the moment I invited her, it was already decided. A pale, cold light surges around me. The ripples of two souls are approaching each other. The natural advantage of being a twin makes it so that Irene doesn't even need to change her wavelength to form a new contract. You must be joking. So many things actually happened back then, so many years, so many calamities. How did you survive? So much anger, despair, hatred. Why haven't you gone mad yet? Greed, nothingness, slander, jealousy, pain. You've seen all the ugliness in the world, yet you have no hope for the future. Why? Why can you still be so optimistic? Why haven't you given up hope? My soul contract is now completely open. More than 300 years and 3 complete lives of memories. That can be said to be a legendary experience, causing the innocent Irene to be astonished. Meanwhile, her suppressed emotions and soul memories made her feel as if she had eaten the most nutritious delicacy in the world. She was growing at a furious pace. Perhaps, even if Pandora's box is opened, even if all calamities are released, there's still hope at the bottom of the box. And, this time, I'm not alone. Alright, don't look at me like that. I know that this sounds really artistic and chinibya, but let's use Cavendish's words. You cheated, and I'm not convinced. Let's fight again. I don't believe that there won't be a day when I beat you up. Fart. That's what His Highness Cavendish said back then. Irene bursts into laughter. Obviously, she is thinking about how every time the two of them sparred in the past, even though Cavendish has the upper hand in terms of overall strength, this usually lazy older brother is always able to use schemes to obtain the final victory. Mitch, that brat always likes to go to extremes. He won't turn back until he hits the wall, and he won't give up until he reaches the Yellow River. Yet, he just happens to be talented, strong, and lucky. Most likely, he will be able to smash through the wall, and it's not like he can't cross the Yellow River either. But, in the end, it always gets out of hand. This time, he really went too far. When he comes back, I'll give him a good beating and let him know the prestige of an older brother. Prestige? Do you have such a thing? In the end, he always calls you by your name, the older brother who always snatches his little brother's toys and snacks. I'm letting him know the cruelty of the outside world. I've been cultivating his competitive spirit and fighting spirit since he was young. This is the love an older brother has for his younger brother. Please call me a good older brother with boundless love, a good older brother who is cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Keep on bragging. You're obviously jealous that the younger brother is more popular with women than the older brother. Hehe, Roland, have you forgotten that after you sign a soul contract with me, I can see your past memories? Soul communication didn't require any time. As we chatted and laughed, Irene Baylor quickly recovered after receiving sufficient nutrients. In just a few short seconds, her nightmare of ice began transforming into a cocoon of ice. And right now, in Deso's eyes, I only silently held the wooden sword for a few seconds before a large white cocoon appeared in front of me. I returned to my senses and lightly touched the cocoon of ice, causing it to begin shattering. Next, an illusory warhorse appeared in front of everyone. Her entire body was enveloped in an icy mist, and her eyes were like 2 twinkling stars. Her physical body was faintly discernible, as if she didn't exist in this dimension. Starlight shone from her physical body, and the moment she stood up, she lightly stomped on the ground, causing the water she was standing on to freeze. This was a warhorse that didn't belong to the mortal plane. Suddenly, the naughty little Irene spat out a breath of cold air at me. Yawn. Being enveloped by the cold air, I subconsciously sneezed. Before I could even react, I was already covered in a layer of snow, turning into a snowman. I shook my head helplessly. With a slight shake of my hand, snowflakes fell into the water, forming a thin layer of ice. As for me, I was covered in a layer of silver armor. The ice armor formed by the thin layer of ice wasn't thick, nor was it heavy. It looked like a fragile work of art, but in reality, it was sturdy and reliable. On Irene's body, the magic of ice started to materialize. A saddle and all sorts of weapons appeared on the horse's body. Javelins, pikes, round shields, long swords. These seemingly exquisite ice weapons were actually filled with the power of ice. Aurora Knight. Even if Desos and the others who knew about the situation didn't exclaim in shock, the White Wolf Guards, who were also Knight, wouldn't forget their old enemy, the legendary Super Knight group, which was said to be made up of all gold rank fighters. Your Majesty, I appreciate your goodwill, but I still have some matters that I need to attend to. I entrust my maid, Rosemary, to you. Please bring her to a safe place. Abandoning the future spy, Rosemary, I happily tore off the annoying dress and allowed the ice armor to stick to my skin. Even though I still had a lot of things to worry about, I felt an indescribable joy and relaxation. Due to the effects of the soul contract, the ice armor was actually quite warm. Not only did it not feel as constricting or cold as the ice armor from before, I even felt like my body was lighter than before. The ice armor actually buffed and strengthened the wearer. Just as Dasos was about to say something, the Snow White Knight and his war horse had already rushed to the door. On the surface of the water, traces of ice appeared. With a bitter expression, Dasos shook his head. However, he could only retract his gaze helplessly. Let's begin the retreat. At this moment, I was riding on frigid moor, galloping at full speed. The barrier of ice was activated and the storm was no longer able to trouble me. Can you transform into a frost dragon? You were able to do it in the past, so you should be able to do it now. Although it's too eye-catching and dangerous, it'll definitely be much faster if we fly there. If you're a legend, I'll be fine. In a sense, Frigid Moor, who had signed a soul contract, was quite similar to a mage's familiar who had signed a magic pet contract. The restriction that the servant's strength couldn't exceed the master's still existed. The beast. Time is truly a butcher's knife. In the past, Lord Roland wasn't so forgetful. Under the command of the Nogger officer, the fishmen in front of her pulled out several fishing nets, seemingly intending to make an underwater version of a horse-stopping rope. However, Irene leaped lightly into the air, ignoring the fishman's interception. Even in the past, you didn't have such a sharp tongue. Where's that big sister snow lady who always smiles so gently? As he joked, he threw the ice javelin. The ice javelin began to spin in the air, drawing a strange arc and directly nailing the Nogger mage who was casting a spell into the water. Then, the ring of ice erupted and froze several Nogger guards who dared to help the mage to death. What kind of image did I have in your heart in the past? I can transform into the appearance of a snow lady, but my current strength isn't sufficient, so I'm afraid that I'll become slightly younger. But, are you sure you want to charge while riding on a snow lady? I imagined a fully armored knight riding on a young girl, shouting holy light, that enemy is worth fighting, as he viciously whipped the young girl's buttocks, forcing her to charge. I really want to try. No, that's too beastly. Irene, you should just maintain this appearance. I thought about how I would never be able to wash away my reputation as the king of gentlemen if others were to see my current appearance. Uncle Police, that's the person. Your Highness Roland, have you forgotten that your memories are now connected? Also, the world you lived in was far too perverted. The opening of my soul allowed me to retain my memories from the other world. That familiar yet unfamiliar retort made me pause for a moment before bursting into laughter. Actually, you can search for the keywords Gentleman Alliance and True Love Siblings in my memories. Right, due to the protection of minors, please do not search for Bayfoam. I take back what I said just now. As expected, there are perverts in every world. Also, you did it on purpose, right? If you didn't say it, who would have taken the initiative to search for you? If you said it, they would have definitely gone over to take a look out of curiosity. I nearly went blind. You have to take responsibility. I'll be responsible for introducing Bayfoam to you. I apologize, please don't take responsibility for me. Even though she was joking, the galloping Aurora warhorse didn't slow down at all. Her natural talent of turning water into ice allowed her to easily jump and avoid the encirclement of the seafolk. Even the fastest seahorse knight was unable to keep up with her pace. Furthermore, with the advantage of my new idea, I didn't have to worry about being knocked off my horse. I only had to choose to attack and kill my target. If I were to meet with a strong offensive magic, the Semigod Equipment Scepter's protective magic would be perfect for an emergency. Protection of the Dark God summons a formless protective shield that absorbs 200 points of magic damage or magic weapon damage. Before the protective shield shatters, the wearer will be immune to stun, transformation, and other control-type magic. Lasts for 10 seconds. Use 3 times a day. After using the final protective shield to block a chain of ice arrows from a Naga mage, we had already reached the border of the Pearl District before the enemy's aerial troops arrived. Let's head to the Church of Law first and meet up with everyone. Please be safe. Chapter 115. For the strong, actual combat would always be the best test. No matter how high level or how famous a secret technique was, if it couldn't be tested in actual combat, it would still be worthless. The recent battle with Rosemary, Kalishin's undead army was probably the most intense one since my reincarnation. To me, that was not only an actual battle, it was also a good opportunity to test my abilities and determine my future path of development. There were many problems exposed in the battle. The most obvious one was that my ability system was too complicated. I lacked a killing move that could end the battle in one go, and the combination of abilities and character positioning was slightly messy. Magic and martial arts were often the exclusive rights of long-lived species. It wasn't just because they had enough time to squander, allowing them to climb to the peak of both magic and martial arts. It wasn't just because of their natural talents and stats that allowed them to reach a realm that short-lived species couldn't reach. The most fundamental reason was that they had inherited secret techniques that allowed both magic and martial arts to overlap. The Twilight Blade and Jade Thorn were the most fearsome weapons of the elven race. Those warriors who wielded magic swords wore light leather armor and chose the most suitable buffs and enchantments for themselves. Their long years of training allowed them to not lose out to any opponent in terms of combat techniques. The magic swords hidden in their sleeves were even more fatal. They were experts in adding various abilities to themselves and their magic swords. As long as one made preparations beforehand, the Twilight Blade, which seemed to have a wild fighting style but was actually cautious and intelligent, was a killing machine that could take on 100 enemies on the battlefield. The Jade Thorn, on the other hand, specialized in all kinds of concealment, sense elimination, and anti-detection spells. Against them, one had to be prepared for the strange situation where the enemy would disappear 4 or 5 times in 100 days. Of course, the prerequisite was that one had to avoid their fatal ambush first. They were the super assassins that gave mags the most headaches. The Blood Tribe's tainted blood demon swordsmen, the dwarfs' golden armored warriors, the demon hunters who were taboo existences, the black-winged people's cursed spear dancers, and the most commonly seen and infamous Death Knight, which made all living beings tremble in fear, could be considered as classic troops that had the advantages of both magic and martial arts. Unlike human high-tier troops that relied on equipment and mounts, these special inheritances often appeared in the form of job advancement. They had their own unique ways of fighting and training. It was the accumulation of countless years of the long-lived species, and there was basically no possibility of it being passed on to outsiders. Perhaps there weren't many of them, but once they appeared on the battlefield, they would definitely be nightmares for the non-human kind. Of course, humans have tried their best in this aspect. The Arcane Knight, the Gold-rank Mage Knight, was created in this way. However, the Arcane Knight is a notoriously weak job class. Not only does it require a lot of talent, but in order to cast spells, the Arcane Knight can't wear heavy armor. As a melee fighter, the Arcane Knight is weaker than warriors and Holy Knight of the same level. The only skill that the Arcane Knight has is the Fireball spell. That's right, this Mage Knight's forte was the 3-circle fire spell, Fireball. Perhaps it was effective in low-level battles, but in a gold-rank battle, no one would be afraid of a 3-circle fire spell. The supporters of the Arcane Knight had tried their best to argue against it. Together with the theory of fire magic, they proposed that 5 fireballs stacked on top of each other can destroy everything. We don't need any other magic at all. That was how the strange 5 Fireball Church was born. At the end of the day, it was because magic and martial arts weren't perfectly combined, and there wasn't a clear definition of the role. In my eyes, the reason why the Arcane Knight failed, even though the number of new Arcane Knights doesn't exceed a single digit every year, the 5 Fireball Church still refuses to admit its failure, was mainly because he split his attention between 2 different fields. He tried to be all-powerful in both melee and long-range combat, but the result was that he was useless in both fields. The reason why those non-human kind succeeded in their job class advancement was undoubtedly because they had a goal and a specialty. Then, they used magic and martial arts to make that specialty blossom. As for abilities that were completely useless to their goal, No matter how useful they were, they wouldn't choose to learn them. The most obvious reason was that those successful dual job classes were all powerful melee fighters or powerful long-range fighters. None of them intended to be like the Arcane Knight, crushing warriors in melee and blasting mags away with long-range fireballs. In the end, they were crushed by the other party's weakness. One specialty has many strengths. With the specialty as the core, one would realize one's role. Using other strengths to make up for one's shortcomings, using one's strengths to make up for the specialty. This was pretty much the general thinking of a warrior with multiple abilities. Then, as someone who possessed 4 different powers, if I were to develop them evenly in an attempt to create an all-round warrior, I would probably end up as a useless arcane knight. What am I best at? How do I use other powers to make my strengths into a specialty and make up for my shortcomings? After completing my reincarnation, I had been pondering over this question. Furthermore, I already had an answer. If you had to choose a job, the Death Knight who specializes in soul summoning is definitely the most suitable one for you. If your talent in Holy Light is 10 points, your necromancy would be 20 points and your swordsmanship would be at least 40 points. Just the combination of necromancy and swordsmanship would allow you to stand at the peak of the Death Knight. Didn't you see how Shiluor's strongest Death Knight, Lionheart, took the initiative to become your follower forever? In the end, it is because you have already achieved unprecedented achievements in the field of Death Knight. Pooey, I am a Saint Knight. I also know ice. Cough, please don't say that I was the one who taught you ice magic. I can't afford to lose my face. If your talent in Holy Light is 10 points, then your talent in ice magic would at most be 0. 1 point. Back then, my head must have been crushed by a door to have followed your request to teach you ice magic. Let me ask you, after comprehending the essence of ice once again, have you learned a new ice magic? Of course. I haven't. If I had the time, I would rather use it to practice my equipment and research on undead creations. Isn't anything better than this hopeless ice magic? As expected, my straightforward reply caused the enraged silly cat to pounce at me once more. She started biting down on me. As a teacher, Heloise was quite qualified. Although most of the students she taught were rebellious disciples and perverts, at the very least, she was outstanding when it came to teaching students in accordance with their aptitudes. Even though this kind of advanced personality education was also the main reason why there were more and more weirdos among her disciples. Cough, I can't say any more, otherwise that darned cat would try to take revenge on me again. The feeling of being drenched in milk in the morning was terrible. The last time, I spent an entire morning explaining to Renee, who woke me up with a piece of white paste on my hand. However, judging from what she said about my talent, the darned cat had already told me what I was best at: swordsmanship. Just like how Adam mocked me in the past, while the other Holy Knight's basic function was as a meat shield, using divine arts and holy light to strengthen their defense and support abilities to become the so-called leader of the team, what I was best at was my offensive swordsmanship. In fact, after several reincarnations, my swordsmanship, which was the pride of a warrior, surpassed most sword saints in this world. Without a doubt, this was an ironic joke that left others speechless. Furthermore, it made Adam, who was known as the best swordsman in this world, feel indignant. A great sword saint who couldn't even defeat a holy knight in swordsmanship. One of the best swordsmen in the world. What a joke. However, as he grew, so did I. In the end, I was still able to suppress him. Perhaps, what Adam regretted the most during his time in the underground world was that he was unable to defeat me in swordsmanship. But this was to be expected. Not mentioning my decent talent in swordsmanship, the power of swordsmanship was originally a skill. When the skill was honed and raised to the level of art, it was the comprehension of life and the world. These things could be washed away by reincarnation, but it wasn't difficult to pick them up again. From a certain standpoint, I was the true undying and long-lived species. While the other long-lived species were extravagantly wasting their time, enjoying 200 years of childhood, I was like the short-lived species, viewing time as life itself. Every day, I was thinking and trying to achieve something. The battles and experiences that I had gone through today were probably more than a dozen Valkyrie combined. When these comprehension and skills settled down, when the accumulated swordsmanship and secrets of 3 lives finally changed from quantitative to qualitative, I didn't think that any sword saint would be able to reach my level. In my eyes, the beastman sword saints were overly crude and lacked emotions. The elf sword saints pursued the limits of techniques and neglected the cruel essence of the art of killing. If the two were to be combined and train in the swordsmanship of both races at the same time, perhaps a pure sword saint would appear. As for the dwarven sword saints and the human sword saints, those dwarfs actually dared to call themselves sword saints. Just with their dwarven downswing, dwarven rolling blade, and dwarven mountain-splitting axe? The human sword saints were even more of a joke. 70% of their abilities were the same as the human sword saints, and they couldn't even use sword energy without their equipment. Normally, I would treat them as a joke. In that case, my future path of development was already clear. I would specialize in close combat swordsmanship, while the other powers would serve as support and bonuses. However, pure swordsmanship would still meet with bottlenecks in top-level duels. Not mentioning those creatures that were immune to physical attacks, the gigantic bodies and thick defenses of great demons, dragons, and other creatures were far too difficult to deal with just the small toothpicks in the sword saint's hands. Otherwise, we wouldn't have worked so hard to help Adam win the inheritance of the Phoenix so that he could use the Phoenix Flames as a support for his swordsmanship. But when I confirmed that close combat swordsmanship would be the core and the other powers would serve as support, I confirmed the direction of my future, and my path became much wider. Sword Dance Ultimate, Flowing Water Swift Sword. Ice magic gathered on the true ice sword. Under the influence of ice magic, the stream-like sword intent transformed into the beautiful ice river of my homeland. That was why I gave it a new name. Ice Sword Ultimate, Instant Ice River. The clear and translucent ice sword was as beautiful as a luxurious crystal sword. As the sword path flowed like a river, the sword energy and freezing air that spread out transformed into a beautiful ice river in midair. Then, when reality and illusion overlapped, the water surface and the sea folk in front of me simultaneously became a part of the ice river. In the instant that I was frozen, the proud Naga military officer arrogantly commanded the fishmen and sea beasts to surround me. The fishmen army that swarmed toward me turned into moving ice sculptures. The leaping fishes and waves froze at the very last moment. In front of the instant ice river, not a single living being was able to react at all. Their memories were still frozen at the instant that they were frozen. Under the buff of ice magic, the silver rank swordsmanship that was supposed to be a restraining type turned into a legend rank swordsmanship with incredible offensive power. As far as the eye could see, all the fishmen within a 30-meter radius around me had been cleared. The frozen river water became my best escape route. The first time I fused my sword technique and ice magic together, it resulted in a power that was greater than 3. Even I was shocked. After all, when I tried it in private, I didn't have such a ridiculous increase in power. It's me. If we were to compare our talent in using ice, even the white dragons wouldn't be a match for us. Irene's voice sounded from beneath me. Only then did I come to a realization. Frigid Moor was at the pinnacle of ice and snow creatures. The power of ice and snow that she brought to me was several dozen times that of my current bronze rank body. Furthermore, her control over the ice element wasn't as bad as mine. When I made my move, she didn't just stand by idly. She was helping me adjust and control the ice element, coordinating with my ultimate to adjust the power. This was just like a dual-core CPU operating in parallel, forcefully increasing the might of this move by countless times. Alright, I knew that there would be people who would complain that the analogy of a magical fantasy world wasn't suitable. I also knew that if Irene could be considered as the most advanced CPU, I would probably only be considered as an outdated 386. Making do with it a little, wasn't this just an analogy? But at this moment, I realized that I had underestimated the effectiveness of external objects. Indeed, my talent in using ice was terrible, but if I were to teach this to Irene Baylor, wouldn't it make up for this flaw perfectly? Similarly, if I were to give the power of death, the power of holy light, and the power of law to other magic pets to boost them and create more secondary cores, my combat strength might increase explosively. Heloise. Alright, at this moment, I decisively thought of the omniscient Heloise. However, the current Heloise only had knowledge and techniques, but she didn't have a physical body that matched her past strength and boundless knowledge. It was obvious that she couldn't meet my requirements. The plans for Heloise's 37 modifications, regarding the change in color of the 4 limbs, and Heloise's 38 modifications, regarding the 3 stages of transformation, should be activated as soon as possible. Right, there's also the Super Cat Leo. I can add at least a dozen other modifications, such as adding the ability to grow bigger after eating mushrooms, or the ability to throw fireballs after eating flowers. Hehe, that sounds interesting. At this moment, it wasn't the time for me to be thinking about such messy matters. I was already quite close to my destination. While it would feel great to charge into the enemy's ranks single-handedly, doing so would be equivalent to exposing myself to the entire battlefield. If the enemy's commander wasn't a fool, he would send his elites to intercept me sooner or later. As expected, after charging past this street corner, 2 sea giants suddenly appeared in front of me. The gigantic sea giants could barely reach the city walls. Even in the giant family, they could be considered huge figures. Wielding rusty ship anchors as their weapons, they possessed boundless strength. On land, an adult sea giant would at least have the strength of a gold-rank human. In the water, once they unleashed their talent of stirring up giant waves, even a giant dragon wouldn't dare to fight against them. Their most well-known hobby, other than fighting against sea dragons, was to find trouble with large ships. The number of ships they had sunk was uncountable, but the reason for their attacks was often inconceivably simple. Sometimes, it was because they wanted to add to their meal, and sometimes, it was because they hoped to obtain a good weapon. It was impossible to forge weapons in the water, and it wasn't easy to obtain metal weapons in the sea. Only large ships had large anchors that the sea giants could use, and they could also use the crew to add to their meal. When this unfortunate news spread, some ships even brought along brand new giant battle anchors as payment for the passage. Unfortunately, the overjoyed sea giants would first accept the payment, then dismantle the anchors and use them as backup weapons before using them as dinner. The reason why we didn't keep our promises? Little thing, do you know how to communicate with barnacles and sea cucumbers? We don't know how to either. This was a lesson and maxim bought with his life by a certain intelligent navigator who gave away a heavy anchor as payment for the passage. Giants with coarse skin and thick flesh weren't easy to deal with, and the sea giants, who were born as the sons of the sea, were even more so the giants among the giants. When the 2 giants moved slightly apart, their gigantic bodies blocked the entire street. Following the stomp of the giants, raging waves began to rise. As long as one was struck by the waves, they would definitely shatter on the spot. In the street behind the giants, the church of the god of law was shining with a dazzling divine light, and the invisible gallows were filled with the corpses of the sea folk. As the church of a true god in the god's domain, it wouldn't fall before the fall of this city. Bearing the crime of war and genocide, they actually dared to barge into the church of the god of law. Should I praise the sea folk for their lack of information and thoughtlessness? According to the rules of the god wars, after this city changed owners, the god statue would probably be tainted. But at this moment, I didn't have the leisure to worry about my god statue of Wu Mianzi. The giants were already in front of me. Little worm, don't move. Let Rabahar trample you to death. Night. Yet another tin can. Baines doesn't like tin cans, it gets stuck in his teeth. Being blocked by the giants meant that there was no way out. But at this moment, I had no other choice. Since there is no other way, only the courageous will emerge victorious. The ice dragon's spear spun furiously and Irene started to increase her speed. My other hand suddenly swung my sword to hit the water, causing huge splashes of water. Useless tricks of the little worm. Scream as much as you can for Rabahar. Rabahar loves to watch the last performance of the little worm. The sea giants in the water were far more agile and powerful than they were on land. With a light grab from Rabahar, a thick wall of waves suddenly appeared on the surface of the water to block the charge. Following that, just as the tip of the spear barely broke through the wall, the giant had already grabbed the tip of the dragon spear that was advancing at high speed. Although the spinning tip of the spear cut his left hand, the heavy anchor in his right hand swung down towards the night. That's it. How boring. Boom. The giant anchor that was several tons in weight fell, sending rocks and snow flying all over the place. The entire street shook. Hey, where's the little worm? But when the giants realized that their target had disappeared, it was already too late. Under the cover of the waves created by both sides, I, who had long thrown away my dragon spear, had already stepped beside the giants. Secret, blade storm. As I spun, the lowly snow lady who was floating in mid-air summoned ice and snow, causing a whirlwind of ice and snow to appear. Swordsmanship secret, blade storm. When using this skill, you will turn into a high-speed whirlwind of blades. The rapidly spinning blades and sword energy will deal heavy damage to all enemy ground troops in the vicinity. At the start, it was just a normal blade storm. But when the power of ice and snow started to overflow from the two swords, it started to leak and erupt, causing the entire world to start snowing. The originally formless sword energy turned into ice blades and spikes under the infiltration of the ice and snow, causing the might of the blade storm to increase exponentially. But this was only the beginning. An even more lethal attack was a pleasant surprise. At this moment, water was constantly being sucked into the whirlwind. As the whirlwind of ice rapidly condensed into ice shards and ice arrows, they were then flung out by the centrifugal force. Due to a freak combination of factors, I mysteriously turned into a spinning top that continuously shot out ice arrows. Under the full support of the Snow Lady Irene, who was in mid-air, every single ice blade that was shot out at high speed was filled with the power of ice. It was comparable to an ice arrow shot out by a silver-ranked ice mage at full power. The might of a single one of them might not be terrifying, but when the number of them was enough to cover the entire sky, turning everyone's field of vision into a sheet of white, the blade storm had evolved from a legend-ranked AoE secret to a saint-rank magic sword secret with astonishing destructive power. The whirlwind of ice continued to spin furiously. Houses, thin ice, lampposts, no matter what it was in the past, under the assault of this concentrated rain of ice arrows, they were all instantly shattered into pieces. When I finally came to a stop, feeling dizzy, there was nothing left in my surroundings. The two incomparably strong sea giants had already turned into beehives with thousands of ice arrows embedded in their flesh. The one who was further away was still breathing, but the one who was closer had his head filled with ice arrows. It was obvious that he could no longer survive. When the giants fell to the ground and I was gasping for breath weakly on the ground, Kolos, who was riding on a thunderstorm, had already rushed over. "Great, Lord, you are fine. Everything is in a mess now, what should we do?" Gritting my teeth, I struggled to stand up. Every second that I dragged on would increase the danger I was in. "Everyone, gather up. Bring along the supplies and rations, we will kill our way out." Chapter 116. When the white-armored Aurora Knight charged out from the entrance of the arena, most of the nobles looked at him as though he was a fool. In their eyes, this knight princess who didn't listen to their advice was already a dead person. Only a few people faintly felt that this knight wasn't destined to die young. Perhaps, the next time they met, many things would change. While the retreat was proceeding orderly, Hermit secretly tugged at the White Wolf Guard officer who was in charge of organizing the retreat. If that female knight reaches the line of escape, find an opportunity to kill her. Find a chance to kill her. I'll bear the responsibility. As the most trusted advisor of the Ottoman Empire Emperor Dasos and one of the most powerful figures in the shadows, Hermit silently made up his mind. That female knight who was clearly in dire straits but still charged forward with a smile reminded him of the legendary Will of Mist and its past glory. Even though she was the princess of a small country who was clearly at a disadvantage, she was able to gain the upper hand in a series of clashes. He had no doubt that she had the intelligence and ability to turn the situation around. And the reappearance of the legendary Aurora Knight might be a sign of the revival of the various powerful troops in the history of the Mist Country, giving the possibility of turning history into reality. If the East Mist Country were to truly rise up once more, if the 7 kingdoms of the far north were to be united as one country, perhaps that polar bear of the far north would once again dominate the north. Furthermore, his own emperor was infatuated with it, as well as the 10 years of non-war, which made this target seem even more unique. In Hermit's mind, such a unique existence was unnecessary from the very start. Perhaps it was an unnecessary action, perhaps it was a rash act, Perhaps it would incur the wrath of His Majesty, perhaps it would cause a serious chain reaction if it were to be leaked, but as the advisor of the Ottoman Empire emperor, he felt that this descendant of the mist would be a highly dangerous target in the future. It was necessary to seize the opportunity to get rid of this unstable factor. Even if he were to be severely punished, it was worth it. This was his unspoken loyalty to the king and the empire. No matter what, I feel that that woman is too dangerous, and I can't like her at all. However, if I were to kill the woman that His Majesty the Emperor likes, I'm afraid that he will turn against me. If the news of me murdering another country's princess is leaked, not only will I be accused of murdering my comrade before the Holy War, but my own people will also think that I'm an idiot who only knows how to fight among themselves. But as long as it's beneficial to this country and Dasos, even if others don't understand, so what if I'm sent to the gallows? From a certain point of view, this chief of intelligence, who always squinted his eyes and had a cunning smile, usually behaved like a playboy. But deep down in his heart, his loyalty to the Ottoman Empire and the emperor had reached an unconventional level where he would give his all until his death. Because he felt that she might pose a threat to the future hegemony of the Ottoman Empire, he had to get rid of her. This was his simple and direct logical thinking. Perhaps it was the result of serious consideration after combining countless pieces of information, or perhaps it was pure intuition, but as the head of intelligence, once Hermit made up his mind, he would definitely act immediately. You guys go too. If it's not convenient for the White Wolf Guard, you guys can do it. If you don't find the target leaving the city, help the guards with the final defense. Don't come back until the mission is completed. As if talking to themselves, several shadows left. The spies began to pass on the target's information, preparing to carry out the dishonorable assassination plan. Just as he turned around and boarded the human-powered carriage that had been prepared in advance, ready to leave first, he found that Dasos was already waiting in the carriage. And beside him, a mage was playing the scene that the mage's eye had just taken. With just one glance, Hermit was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. What was playing was the words that had just been said. Kill her if you have the chance. And Dasos's face was ashen as he sat there like a puppet. He seemed expressionless, but Hermit knew that this was a sign that he was extremely angry. Just as the young emperor's advisor lowered his head, intending to bear the wrath of the king, he heard the question that was suppressing his strong emotions. The blood mage Emperor Marsalit should be able to move by now. Give him a mission for me. Go to the basement of my bedroom and drag out the old man who should be drowning. As he spoke, he also threw him a blood-dripping dragon head emblem. This was the only proof of royal power that could command the demigod blood devourer. What's going on? He doesn't intend to punish me. Hermit's face was full of hesitation. This is a super secret, so if you meet anyone on the way, just kill them. By the way, emphasize to Marsalit that if there's a possibility that something might happen to the old man, remember to give him a stab in advance. Immediately, Hermit understood. Now that the situation was so chaotic, only the super strong could enter and exit the chaotic area at will. Marsalit, who was rebelling with him, came and went like the wind. Even if he brought people with him, how could he be discovered? How was this a rescue mission? It was clearly an opportunity for him to kill with a borrowed knife. My dear Hermit, do you still remember our ideals? I want the Ottoman Empire to stand at the top of the world. In front of it, what is a woman? He still spoke in a businesslike manner. He didn't mention killing anyone, but the words squeezed out from between his teeth indicated that he had already made up his mind. Dasos was the only one who signed the contract. Under the intentional or unintentional forgetting, the two sides agreed that their hostile actions were only aimed at the country. They forgot that personal safety was involved. If his subordinates acted on their own and used a borrowed knife to kill someone, or if a demigod unintentionally killed someone to silence them while carrying out a mission, the contract wouldn't care. Moreover, in the eyes of the contract and in Dasos's own heart, he didn't give any orders. Everything was his subordinates' reckless actions. Since she isn't fated to be mine, then her remaining identity can only be that of my enemy. If I can't get her, no one else can. Even if he couldn't hear the voice hidden in the deepest part of the emperor's heart, the king's trust in him from the bottom of his heart, this way of giving up everything for the sake of righteousness, had already moved the usually indifferent hermit to the extreme. This was the disposition of a hero that he worshipped and swore loyalty to. This was the Winter Wolf King who was fated to lead the Ottoman Empire to the top. Yes, Your Majesty. You definitely won't be disappointed. Ding. The host has killed a sea giant. The reward is 198 fate points, special spoils of war, the soul of the sea giant and the sea giant's smelly socks. The soul of the sea giant, for 10 minutes, sea giant battle soul possession. Strength +5, agility -2, grants the ability to breathe underwater and control giant waves. As for the sea giant's smelly socks, you can try to make a raincoat with it. It's definitely waterproof, and it can even increase your stats. As long as you don't have a nose or a slow sense of smell, you won't die from the stench. Ding. Congratulations to the host for creating a Saint-tier demon sword esoteric, ultimate sword cyclone. Your physical body has once again achieved a breakthrough, strength +1, agility +1. Legendary sword art esoteric, blade storm. Using this skill, you will become a high-speed rotating blade storm. The rapidly rotating blade and sword aura will severely injure all enemy ground troops in the vicinity. Usage prerequisites: 20 strength, 10 agility, 15 vitality. Saint-tier demon sword esoteric, ultimate sword cyclone. This skill is the evolution of Bladestorm. Only a sword saint who has completely mastered Bladestorm can attempt to learn this skill. Using this skill, you will become a high-speed rotating ice storm. The rapidly rotating blade and sword aura are only the first wave of attack. The intense cold air and ice arrows will bring the final destruction to your enemies. This skill is extremely powerful and has a large area of effect. Usage prerequisites: 22 strength, 15 agility, 20 vitality, 15 intelligence. The complete form of Ultimate Sword Cyclone requires the help of Frigid Moore and Irene Baylor. The notifications from the system made me happy. After breaking through to 20 agility, the racial talent I received was even more eye-catching. However, I didn't have the leisure to appreciate it. The intense dizziness and exhaustion caused me to be unable to stand up straight. Although the power of the upgraded Ultimate Sword Cyclone has increased greatly, the usage requirements have also increased greatly. I have barely reached this basic requirement, but there is a hidden requirement that I can't avoid no matter what basic rank. Swordsmanship esoteric doesn't mean that the stronger the better. The most suitable one is the best. As a bronze rank, it is already difficult for me to forcefully use the legend rank sword esoteric by relying on my basic stats and sturdy physical body. If I were to jump another rank, it would be no different from seeking my own death. Through the system's quantification, the basic information of the swordsmanship is clear at a glance. A strength-type swordsmanship esoteric requires strength to increase its lethality, agility to maintain the speed, accuracy and balance of the attack. It also requires vitality to deal with the recoil and impact, so as to prevent one from accidentally killing oneself. As for intelligence, it is obviously a requirement for magic. Every time I increase my rank, it is actually the support of my basic stats. The current me, even though I have barely reached the quality requirement of my basic stats, in terms of quantity, I am still far from it. At this moment, both of my hands are injured by my own sword aura. Even with Irene as an external mana storage, the little amount of mana I have is still wiped clean. My physical strength is so weak that my head hurts endlessly and I feel nauseous. The reason why I didn't directly kill myself is because Irene helped me deal with the recoil of my mana. Furthermore, my mastery of swordsmanship has already reached a whole new realm. Even after putting in so much effort, this ultimate sword cyclone still isn't at its full power. Under the limitations of my current physical body, the original Ultimate Sword Cyclone's power and duration is less than a third of its original state. This advanced version of the Saint Rank Magic Sword Esoteric is probably not even a tenth of the full version. Otherwise, under my Saint Rank Swordsmanship's profound meaning, a gold rank human sea giant would have been killed in an instant. It wouldn't have ended up with only one dead and one injured after the water and earth ice arrows power was boosted. In order for the magic sword esoteric to be truly effective, I probably can't slack off on my swordsmanship and magic. Based on my current condition, My swordsmanship can only wait for its rank to be upgraded before it can become stronger. On the contrary, my magic is the real headache. After I return, I will immediately activate the Heloise modification plan. However, the most important thing right now isn't to think about the future or imagine the full power of the ultimate sword cyclone. If we are unable to overcome this obstacle, we probably won't have a future. With Kolos's help. Alright, with her support, let us ignore the mysterious glare not too far away. Kolos, can you let me walk by myself? No, Lord, don't force yourself. I'm not forcing myself. Your clothes are already drenched. Thinking about it, you are a girl now. You are the one who is forcing yourself. You are obviously an elf. Isn't it scientific to have such a domineering body? The curves in the water are obvious. When some unscientific body parts touch me, it is tempting to commit a crime, do you understand? The natural herbal fragrance at the ends of your hair smells nice, but it makes me waver. Do you believe it? Not too far away, deer and moose are already crying in envy. Do you realize it? More importantly, when I remember that your soul is that of a male, I really want to find a pillar to knock my head against, do you understand? Alright, before the vengeance on the other side materializes, I return to the Church of the God of Law. A faint silver light emanates from the church. That seemingly gentle radiance blocks the river water that is infused with God power. From Kolos and the others, I find out that the two sea giants aren't here to stop me. They are only here to stop all living people who are advancing to the Church of the God of Law to seek refuge. Before I return, they have already exchanged blows with Kolos several times. There are many other small seafolk squads like this. Their goal is to stop important people from hiding in the Church of the God of Law. In reality, the seafolk and their subordinates have no intention of attacking the Church of the God of Law. In fact, there is no need for them to do so. The Church is the land of God. The land of God is free from all harm. This is the power of a true God. But, it is a pity that as the city falls and the believers of the God of Law die, the Kajisi branch of the Church of Law, which doesn't meet the minimum requirement of the Church of Law, will fall into a church. In that case, they don't even need to do anything personally. The river water will be sufficient to solve all problems. Furthermore, the statue of a true God of the Church will become the best sacrifice to please the malevolent gods of chaos. But, even though the seafolk who trespassed were punished by the God of Law and hung on invisible gallows, the interior is still a mess. What reassures me the most are the few trailers placed in the main hall. They aren't God equipment or treasures, but the most important things at the moment: rations, medicine, and other necessities. It is impossible to bring much rations with us during a battle. The remaining rations in the underground base are what we have left behind in our luggage. The engineers and the others won't be able to support us for long. So, the moment we return to the surface, I get Kolos to secretly gather rations. If contracts could be perfect and flawless, if the law could prevent all crimes, perhaps this world would have become a peaceful and fertile land long ago. How could I rest in peace in a land filled with enemies? I had been prepared to retreat from the very start. Now, sufficient rations are neatly prepared on the trailers. As long as we can reach the underwater base, we will be able to attack or retreat at will. We have already achieved a strategic victory. Are you ready? Yes, Lord. We can start anytime. If it wasn't for you insisting that I go change my clothes, we could have started 10 minutes earlier. Lord is the most inflexible. How annoying. Alright, I ignore the cute complaint that makes me want to bang my head against the wall. I won't force you to change out of your wet clothes. Even if most of the people left behind are gentlemen with unique tastes and won't do anything, Renee and the others who are filled with resentment will really eat me alive. Renee, isn't it just that my figure is slightly better than yours? Is there a need to stare at me with such envious and jealous eyes? What you should be worried about is your back. Look at Callie, she's writing notes on your back. A new supplementary lesson plan is brewing. Obviously, this isn't the time to think too much about it. Looking at the seafolk elites gathering outside, I made up my mind. Then, let the great trial begin. Kolos raises the semigod equipment grimoire in her hands and announces loudly. I, the Bishop of the Ottoman region of the Church of Law, Koros Aindan, a real name that has long been forgotten by everyone, hereby declare that villains are running amok in this city. A genocide and an unjust war are happening before our eyes. In the name of our God, Wumianzi, we shall judge all crimes in this city. Primordial Codex Fragment Page, a replica of the God equipment. After the God of Law ascended to the throne, it was greatly strengthened. Faith in Law, 169-2000, every 1,000 people's faith will increase by 1 point per week. A maximum of 50 points per month. When the number of points reaches 1,000, 1,000 points can be used to duplicate the Primordial Codex Fragment Page. Effect 1, 3, Slight. Effect 2, Great Trial. Active consumes 100 points of faith in Law in one go and consumes 1 point every minute thereafter. When the user activates it, everyone in the city will be subjected to the judgment spell equivalent to that of a legend-ranked judge, judging the crimes committed in the past 3 hours. If guilty, one will be subjected to restrictions on freedom, invisible shackles, weapon lock and many other negative effects. In the Great Trial, the effects of all executioner's law incantations will be doubled and their rank will temporarily increase by 1. Prerequisites: this city's laws are chaotic and villains are running amok. This city is on the verge of destruction. Following the declaration, the silver light of order first transformed into a pillar of light before spreading outwards. Countless cries of alarm sounded out. The sea folk who were enjoying the massacre were obviously annoyed by the effects of this unprecedented law incantation. Although it's still impossible to save them, restraining them like this might give the commoners more chances to escape. There's a time limit for the Great Trial. Let's head out now and rush to the entrance of the underwater base before the effects disappear. At this moment, the 2 frigid Maw had already transformed into the heavy ice boar form, which was suitable for heavy armor charging. Renee and I would be the spearhead of the escape convoy. Feeling that my rank had been temporarily increased by 1 rank due to the Great Trial, I finally recovered some stamina and magic power. Patting my mount, I took the lead and charged forward. I still have 68 faith points left. Does that mean 68 minutes? In the past, it only took 30 minutes to get there. I wonder if that's enough. Forget it, God's plans are always inferior to man's plans. I'll just do my best and leave it to fate. Indeed, God's plans were always inferior to man's plans. Changes that I couldn't have expected had already happened. Other than the Ottoman semigod mage who was carrying out a secret mission in the rain, the battle between semigod Hydra and Valkyrie at my destination was getting more and more brutal and intense. The sky was torn apart and the river water was emptied before filling up again. The sea folk who were swept into the river were instantly vaporized into nothingness. In order for the convoy, which was fully loaded with rations, to enter through the passage on the ground, the 9-headed monster blocking the only path was a barrier that was impossible to bypass. Hurry up, we'll be safe once we reach the base. Our convoy had just broken through the blockade at the entrance, but we didn't know that there was a huge monster in front of us. I feel that things won't go so smoothly. Silly cat, shut up. Otherwise, I'll learn from the great Demonis and really turn my magic pet into a crow so that you can caw all day long. Chem. That seems like a good idea. A 3-phase transformation pet fairy. It's you, Heloise. Chapter 117. Holy silver light shrouds the entire city. In the Great Judgment, the sea folk who are currently encircling the remaining Ottoman forces finally meet with some trouble. Along with Croesus' declaration of judgment, the silver pillar of light continuously emits flashes of brilliance that represents order. Every city slaughterer who is dyed red by judgment is struck by the flashes of light and is punished by the power of law. Based on their crimes, some of them have their movement restricted, some of them have their weapons taken away, some of them are shackled and some of them have all 3 types of shackles. There is more than one type of shackles. The most common one is handcuffs. If the crime is serious, leg shackles will be added. If the crime is even more serious, it is not impossible for the entire body to be tied with iron balls. As it is a semigod equipment's area of effect judgment without a source, it only consumes the stored faith force. The restraints on each individual target are not too strict. The material of the handcuffs is not much stronger than pig iron. Any beastman warrior might be able to easily tear it apart. Perhaps this is nothing to a true expert. However, to the low-tier fishmen, it is fatal. Every army has the most cannon fodder. The number of fishmen at the lowest level of the seafolk invading army is undoubtedly astronomical. They are the main force that can cause the most damage in this situation. Furthermore, their small bodies are bound by iron chains, handcuffs, and iron balls. Not many of them are able to move. According to the post-battle statistics, in that 1 hour of the sudden restraints on the invaders, at least 70,000 to 80,000 civilians escaped from the hopeless situation. This is even more of a help to the warriors. In a battle between two warriors, if one of them is suddenly restrained, even if the restraint only lasts for 0.1 seconds, it is still a decisive opportunity. This is the effect of military-level strategic forbidden spells, including magic and divine arts. Perhaps it might not be able to affect a semigod or myth-ranked expert. However, as long as it appears on the battlefield, it can completely change the situation of the entire battlefield. What the two Chaos faction True Gods did is a contra-level, perpetual, strategic forbidden spell, Blessing of the Sea God, City of Rain Falohi. Contra-level and military level are only differences in the effectiveness of extraordinary magic. There is no difference between the two. Emperor Yungye's Ice Eon is only a military-level spell. However, that attack can wipe out a city and turn hundreds of kilometers into an ice field. It is even more terrifying than most contra-level forbidden spells. No one would be willing to be hit by it. The biggest difference between the two is probably the area of effect and the duration. Military-level spells have obvious effects, but the duration is short. However, this City of Rain will only change the environment and will not cause any direct damage. However, the duration is probably forever. But because of this, contra-level forbidden spells often require extra sacrifices, which is rarely seen in history. National forbidden spells like this often happen. This time, the seafolk and the True Gods had sacrificed so much. Of course, they wouldn't do it just for a piece of land. The dark clouds in the sky would continue to spread, and the City of Rain would continue to expand its territory as time passed. Within its range, other than the dry areas designated by the user of the forbidden spell, the other areas would become the new territories of the City of Rain. Although the speed of expansion is extremely slow, as long as the water elemental goddess who is the source of magic doesn't die, there is no possibility of this expansion stopping. This will always be the biggest problem for the Ottoman Empire. Perhaps, countless sea tribes are already on their way here. As new tribes move in and their territory expands, Rainland will sooner or later become a country of the sea tribe. It is just like the cancer cells on a cancer patient. The longer it grows, the more dangerous it will be. By the time it really erupts, it will already be too late. That's why when I discovered the effects of this forbidden divine art that is obviously the work of a true god, I unhesitatingly gave up on the possibility of turning the situation around. Right now, the only possibility of turning the situation around is to kill the caster of this forbidden divine art. Even if the caster is foolish enough to not hide in an absolutely safe place, it is likely that a true god's caster appears in front of me. This isn't someone that I can deal with in my current state. Although my Law Faction's Great Judgment series was also quite strong, it was only a support-type forbidden spell that could be used against armies. It wasn't very effective against enemies. The strongest part of this forbidden spell was its ability to raise Law by 1 rank and double the effects of Law incantations. But right now, without enough Law job classes, this forbidden spell wouldn't be able to display its full potential. This is also the main effect of its design. Perhaps it isn't much right now, but this forbidden divine art with strict requirements can be activated by duplicated god equipment pages. As long as every city's Law job class can have it in the future, perhaps any empire or race will have to re-evaluate the risks and costs of starting a war. And when such a fact was gradually recognized by the world, the small and weak countries would undoubtedly increase the number of Law job class members, promoting the rise of the Law faction from another direction. And when the Law faction truly rose to power, when the power of Law was equally effective against Order creatures that had crossed the bottom line, and when the fact that Chaos creatures could also learn and control Law was discovered, Perhaps this new power of the Order faction would reveal its true colors as a neutral faction. Thus, in order to obtain the best marketing result, I intended to design the best opportunity for it to make an appearance instead of standing on the side of the loser in this battlefield where it is destined to lose, becoming an additional decoration on the crown of the victor. However, what I didn't expect was that the moment this forbidden divine art that was destined to be ineffective was activated, it would achieve astonishing results. Roar, roar, roar. The roaring Hydra's 9 heads are all in a frenzy. He is frenziedly spitting out venom, flames, ice and lightning, but he is unable to hit the agile opponent in front of him. As for Longtu Basra, he appears and disappears from time to time in the void. Every time he appears, the floating Dragonslayer spear will shatter one of the dragon heads. Even if Hydra in the water is able to quickly use his powerful regeneration ability to regrow the dragon heads, the blind angle caused by the loss of the dragon head is enough for the Dragonslayer spear to take the opportunity to chop off another dragon head. Even if the regeneration ability takes effect a few seconds later, Basra doesn't hesitate to look for his next target. That is because he knows that when his Dragon Seal ability takes effect, Hydra's regeneration ability is no longer limitless. The Hydra roared furiously, but he was still unable to break free from the chains. Furthermore, the strange chains were getting closer and closer to him. Not only was he unable to use the transfiguration technique, it was also gradually cutting off his connection with the river. If this continued, his regenerative abilities would run out sooner or later. Hydra is roaring in rage, but he is also terrified. As an ancient sea monster, he can faintly see his own doomsday. Originally, the two sides should have been evenly matched, but the reason why the situation has become one-sided is because of the 40-minute Great Judgment. Actually, at the start of the battle, Hydra has the absolute advantage. Due to the activation of the True God's forbidden spell, Basra was forced to make the first move. After losing the advantage of being an ambush hunter, he naturally fell into a disadvantageous position. But when the silver light of order descends, the situation is reversed yet again. Now, a gigantic chain is tied around the 9-headed dragon's body. Although the 9-headed dragon's body is powerful, it is still unable to break free from the chains that should have been incredibly weak. Now, the chains are flashing with a dark golden light, and runes and magic arrays with special effects against dragons are faintly discernible. It is evident that this is a top-level divine weapon against dragons. Looking at the bizarre scene before me, I am stunned at first, but then I come to a realization. Perhaps due to a freak combination of factors, the reason why Longtu Basra is almost invincible against dragons has finally been discovered. As a Valkyrie, when Basra was still a relatively ordinary Wood Elf Ranger, he advanced to the Twilight Blade class. Their specialty is to target their opponent's attributes and abilities, giving themselves and their own weapons the most suitable buffs. And obviously, Basra is still a Twilight Blade, and he is still an expert in weapons enchantment. It is just that his specific enchantment is obviously an extraordinary Dragonslayer special effect that normal Twilight Blades would never be able to learn. This is also the reason why he always carries a large number of Dragonslayer weapons with him. Then, the reason why the situation has developed to this point is obvious. When the gigantic chains and shackles fell from the sky, how could Basra, who has been through countless desperate situations, miss this opportunity? He immediately used his ability to enchant the chains with Dragon Seal, Dragon Bind, and Dragonslayer, forcefully turning the gigantic chains that Hydra could break free from at any time into a super dragon-fighting artifact that can bind semigod dragons. Not only that, the chains are already bound to Hydra's body. No matter who did it, Basra, thank you. The rest is simple. The originally balanced situation has completely lost its balance. Basra gave the Undying Hydra a good beating, and just as the Undying Hydra is about to rise to the sky, we charged forward and finally arrived here. In front of us, even though the chains are tightly bound, the ferocious 9-headed dragon is still not to be underestimated. This mountain-like beast occupies half of the river, and every time its dragon head fails to break free and crashes into the ground, it will cause an earthquake in the surroundings. The dragon breath that the dragon head spits out easily shatters the mountains in the distance. And Basra, who has the upper hand, is obviously more powerful. With a casual wave of his hand, the sword at his waist floats in midair, before enlarging into a dragon-slaying greatsword. Lightning sparks fly everywhere, and the magical runes that represent dragon slaying appear on the blade of the sword. As the greatsword swings down, the gigantic dragon head spits out poisonous blood and falls into the river. To be honest, looking at a battlefield of this level, I really feel like turning around and leaving. Based on our current strength, we would die mysteriously if we were to get too close to a battlefield of such pinnacle strength. However, the position of the Hydra happens to be blocking the entrance to the underwater base, making it impossible for us to avoid it. Wait for Basra to obtain victory? It's hard to say who will win and who will lose. The Great Judgment should last for less than 20 minutes, and as long as the time is up, all the shackles of sin will disappear on the spot. And no matter what Basra did, as long as he is still enchanted, the enchanted weapon itself will disappear, and the enchantment effect will naturally disappear as well, and Hydra will definitely regain his freedom. As for hoping that the battle will end in just 20 minutes. In a battle between semigods, if the two sides aren't too far apart, it is possible that the battle will last for several years. If Hydra is so easy to deal with, he would have long since been bound for 40 or 50 minutes. Hydra's innate natural talent of regeneration is the reason why he is known as the king of prolonged battles. I glanced at the caravan behind me and silently unsheathed my sword. However, I have no intention of having anyone else participate. In such a situation, even if it is a classic saying that the braver one will win when two sides meet on a narrow path, for this to happen, the difference in strength between the two sides must not be too great. Otherwise, the braver one's sacrifice will be meaningless. Since a battle of this level means death if one gets involved, then the only way is to think of a way to avoid getting involved at all. This is the toughest test of one's vision, combat experience, and agility. Our strongest, Kolos, might have reached Saint rank thanks to the forbidden spell, but a battle of this level is definitely not something that she, who has never experienced battles between semigods, can participate in. Charge! Let's kill that evil dragon. That enemy is worth fighting. Just as I was thinking about it, Renee seems to have misunderstood my action of unsheathing my sword, which gave her an inexplicable courage. She actually slaps her steed and charges forward first. Damn it. Stop saying deathfalg, what the dead often say before they die. Hurry up and come back. There is a reason for Renee's confidence. At this moment, Renee, who was raised to silver rank by the system's cheat, had barely managed to reach gold rank after receiving frigid maw. After being raised to legend rank by the forbidden spell, her unprecedented strength made her feel that she is omnipotent. Along the way, the wanton slaughter of the powerful seafolk gave her an inexplicable confidence. But if I were to say it, any silver rank veteran would be able to easily beat up this legend rank who is immature in all aspects. Just as I was about to stop him, a blood-red figure blocked my path. It was a red-robed archmage. He had a head full of silver hair, and his face was as red as a baby's. He had a kind and gentle smile on his face, making him look like a benevolent elder. The legend rank Aurora Knight is indeed brave and skilled in battle. As expected of the Knight Princess, I am the Ottoman state teacher, Marsalit. Under the orders of the Emperor, I am here to protect the princess. Let me lend her a helping hand. I can make use of this opportunity to exact vengeance for Damas. Following the raising of his staff, a scarlet-red light shone on both sides. Under the buff of berserk bloodlust, Renee increased the speed and might of her charge. On the other hand, the attack directed at the nine-headed dragon was a venomous blood-loss curse. In an instant, the dragon head that was trying hard to regenerate spat out a large amount of poisonous blood, causing the regeneration to fail. The Blood Mage Emperor, Marsalit? Why would he be here? If it was anyone else, they would have thought that he was a kind-hearted person. However, my heart was filled with wariness and surprise. This Ottoman state teacher has always kept a low profile and appeared as a good person to the outside world. However, history had exposed the true face of this murderer and poisoner. Just as I mentioned before, as a master of water magic, an unorthodox variant of blood magic, he had long viewed other living beings as a living blood bank. He loved the blood of women and infants the most. The crimes he had committed were too numerous to be recorded. Even if he were to be executed 100 times, it wouldn't be considered too much. As for taking revenge for Damas, that was even more ridiculous. Back then, when Hydra first appeared at this location, he had indeed killed dragon hunter Damas, who was guarding the exit, and severely injured Marcelit, who was attacking the seafolk on the fleet. However, in history, the two of them were undeniably mortal enemies. Marcelit disregarded the price he had to pay to cultivate the depraved and evil blood magic in order to take revenge on Damas. He should be happy that he had died. The sudden appearance of the murderer and the lies he spouted made me raise my guard. At this moment, Renee had already rushed to the edge of the semigod battle zone. Naughty brats really get carried away easily. Damn it. Get out of the way. Above my head, a crow was silently flying in circles. Even though it was raining cats and dogs, it was unable to wet its wings. Those blood-red eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. Chapter 118. Guardians of the Forest. I have no idea where those fellows popped out from. Then, they started talking about protecting your family's forest. If you were to chase them away, not only will you lose your forest, you will also lose your manor and your old horse. How are they guardians? They are obviously a bunch of bandits, an unlucky fellow who lost his own forest and manor. As a radical nature protector, Druel's reputation has never been too good. As a former guardian of the forest, a radical Druel organization that tends to protect nature and vegetation, even though she has been intentionally avoiding her past experiences, we are still able to guess many things. Judging from the heavy makeup that she has been putting on recently, she is most likely a wanted criminal on the surface with a guilty conscience. Also, judging from her outstanding fighting skills and strength, the bounty on her head is probably quite high. However, at this moment, I can't help but feel grateful for the sharp reflexes that came from her rich combat experience. Kolos. Under the support of a blood mage, the reckless brat has already reached the edge of the semigod battlefield. Subconsciously calling out Kolos's name is the only possibility of saving her life. Fortunately, Kolos doesn't disappoint me. Just by calling out her name, she knows what to do. Lightning Cage. As a derivative of the four great elemental magic wind magic, lightning magic is famous for its high attack power from the very start. Unlike fire magic, which is also one of the two great cannons, which has high attack power and a large area of effect, lightning magic is famous for its high speed, high frequency, and suddenness. Different from elemental mags who can directly control the power of the elements, Druel has two ways of controlling lightning. One is direct control, similar to mags, and the other is indirect control of nature and the weather. Although it has many weaknesses such as inconvenient control and the need to calculate in advance, lightning descending from the sky is more powerful and has a longer range. Furthermore, its concealment and suddenness make it impossible to guard against, making it the first choice of the Storm Druel. As a Storm Druel who was once proficient in summoning lightning, the dark clouds covering the sky actually increased his strength greatly. The temporary Saint rank Kolos gives up on chanting and uses her will to guide the dark clouds to send down lightning. The moment she chants the name of the divine art, 17 consecutive lightning bolts strike down, forming a lightning barrier. However, the barrier isn't the enemy, but the blindly charging knight. 6th Circle Storm Druel Divine Art. Summon a barrier made of lightning to block and hinder the enemy's movement. In its original state, there are 6 lightning pillars, which can be lengthened and widened according to the user's ability. Once the barrier is touched, the lightning will explode. In a lightning storm, what you want is definitely not an umbrella, but a lightning rod. What? You're holding a lightning rod, but you're hit. Alright, I'll be straightforward. The lightning rod refers to a foolish spearman who runs around on a rainy day with a spear. Remember to recruit spearmen with a high salary and buy insurance for them. It's everyone's responsibility to protect spearmen. Please support the automatic insurance plan to protect spearmen. TSS 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 TSS. With the temporary Saint rank buff, the original 6 lightning bolts became 17, and 15 of them only played the role of blocking the path. Only 2 of the weakest lightning bolts struck right on top of Sage's head, using the swimming plasma to remind this naughty child that she had touched the edge of the most dangerous bottom line. Unfortunately, although the Aurora Knight was one of the very few top-level magic pet knight that could achieve telepathy with her mount, Renee was also one of the very few noob knight that didn't have any positive effects. Instead, she would affect her mount's judgment and actions. TSS 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 TSS. Frigid Moor Shiver, who had already discovered the lightning cage, hurriedly stopped. Renee, who didn't react in time, wanted to charge forward. Under the clash of two wills, the originally successful wild charge still took one more step forward and directly crashed into the lightning barrier, causing the lightning bolts to explode. The lightning bolts wandered around Renee and Shiver's bodies. Judging from the pitiful screams, they were at least medium rare. Everything that happened in the next second proved that it was indeed worth it. Not far away, a dark green ball of venom suddenly landed on the ground and corroded the ground. Without a sound, a 5-meter-wide hole appeared in the ground. The 9-headed dragon's 18 eyes had no blind spots at all. His field of vision was incredibly wide. Even though his physical body was tightly bound, how could he not notice our arrival and Renee's charge? And so, the venom-spitting dragon head casually spat out dragon breath, which was more than enough to deal with her. If Renee hadn't been stopped by the lightning cage, based on the 9-headed dragon's precise calculations, she would have been hit by the ball of venom and corroded into nothingness. If it wasn't for Kolos's timely reaction, I would have been thinking about what I should write on this naughty brat's grave. This foolish princess's dream was to be like the main character in a legendary knight's novel, charging towards a gigantic dragon. It was a pity that she only met a windmill, until that day when she met a semigod 9-headed dragon. She realized her dream and proved her courage. Then, she charged towards a semigod, so what then? Let's just say it like this: Renee Chin Mist died in AD 1897 at the age of 14. Cause of death: poisoning from a knight's novel. But at this moment, I didn't have the heart to discipline her, because there were more troublesome matters to deal with. Seeing that Renee had escaped from death, the Ottoman state teacher Marsalit in front of him had a look of pity on his face. The only thing missing was a "why didn't I die" expression. What a pity. If I had succeeded in my charge just now, I might have been able to deal a fatal blow to the evil dragon. Fatal blow? A newbie knight who had barely reached the gold rank in terms of overall combat power against a semigod hydra? Even if I managed to hit him, I would probably be ignored. This shoddily made-up story that didn't use my brain at all, this worry that was so fake that it was a complete insult to my intelligence as the one being deceived. But in reality, there was no need for me to guess the other party's intentions. He was here to scheme and murder. Evidence. This city was currently in the Great Judgment phase, so it was normal for him to suddenly appear. However, from the moment he cast the Berserk Bloodlust spell on Renee, his body was covered in a layer of bright red light of sinners. This was the judgment of the judgment spell for attempted murder. Why did he want to find trouble with Renee? Didn't he want to kill Roland? Actually, after I tore off my clothes, I dashed back to the church in an ice armor, almost naked. After which, I changed into a male knight's attire. The ice armor covered my face, but it was obvious that I was a male under the heavy armor, so it was impossible for me to be mistaken as a male. On the other hand, the mission that Marsalit received was kill the Shadow Princess of the Mist Royalty. She is an Aurora Knight and her overall combat power is around gold rank. Previously, Renee's strength couldn't be hidden from the true experts. She didn't even reach bronze rank, so how could she advance to silver rank Aurora Knight? Thus, from the very start, Marsalit treated Renee as the Shadow Princess Roland. At this moment, Marsalit thought that his actions were hidden and that his position was high, but he didn't notice the fact that he had been exposed. After all, he was an archmage dressed in a blood-red robe, and what he practiced was blood magic that was filled with blood-red aura. This red light was long ignored by him, and the negative effects of Great Judgment couldn't even break through his defensive magic. However, it is good that you are fine. He was still trying to defend himself. But I didn't have the intention to expose him. On the contrary, I nodded my head in agreement. Yeah, I almost. Princess Renee would have been able to make a name for herself. What a pity. She is a true legend. Wearing the helmet of ice, I played the role of a simple-minded and crude knight perfectly. The information that I accidentally leaked out further confirmed Marsalit's guess. He rubbed his chin and nodded his head in satisfaction, as though he was satisfied with his intelligence and acting skills. At the same time, I used the phylactery of the Lich on me to ask Rosemary about the intelligence and weaknesses of the state teacher. After all, he is a semigod, and the strongest person on our side, Kolos, is only a pseudo-Saint rank with 10 minutes left. No matter how I looked at it, it wasn't worth it to fight him head-on. Even though I heard that he is heavily injured, a semigod is still a semigod, and he definitely isn't easy to deal with. Even if it is just a counterattack before his death, it is more than enough to drag us down with him. Weaknesses. How can a person like him have any weaknesses? Fine, don't pull my phylactery, let me think about it. He really doesn't have any weaknesses. Even if he is heavily injured, he is still able to absorb the blood of others to recover himself, forcefully maintaining the vitality of his physical body. His survivability is extremely high, and if we are unable to kill him, his revenge will definitely be fatal. Wait, you are saying that he is relying on sucking blood to maintain his mobility? His body isn't filled with his own blood and bodily fluids. After getting a positive answer, thinking about this, I came up with an idea. Anyway, there isn't any loss. Let's give it a try. Thus, the face under my helmet revealed a simple and honest smile exclusive to a pure holy knight. Ottoman state teacher Margolint, along the way, we eliminated a general of the sea folk and picked up a bottle. Someone said that it is a god equipment. You are knowledgeable, can you help us take a look? In the distance, Renee had already rushed back on her horse with a pale face. Marcelit retracted his gaze, as though he was looking at a prey. Hearing my words, Marcelit smiled. It isn't Margolint, it is Marcelit. Do you knight whose muscles grow all the way to your brains know what a god equipment is? It really is a little weird, let me take a look. The ancient bronze bottle was filled with the scent of history. Although there wasn't a single ripple of magic, it seemed to be made of brand new materials. This meant that time didn't mean anything to him, and it also proved that it was extraordinary for it to have transcended history. It really is a treasure. It is a pity that the original god of the god equipment has fallen and the god power of this god equipment has been exhausted. The remaining use of it can only be considered as a toy with some special effects. Let me study it for a while. When the matter at hand is over, I will reward you handsomely. Judging from the gleam in his eyes and the malicious smile on his face, I can guess that in Marcelit's eyes, all of us are already dead people. Thus, the generous reward he would give us is to send us to a comfortable death. Thank you, Lord Marbir. I am lacking a wife. My hometown, Xiaofang, has been waiting for me for many years. Not Marbir. Forget it, you can call me whatever you want. However, right after that, the blood mage focused all of his attention on this ancient bottle. The attractiveness of a god equipment to a mage was self-evident. Even though it was already worn out, if he was able to study a bit or two of the secrets of the gods, Marcelit's power would probably increase explosively. Especially since this god equipment originated from an ancient sea god. The blood magic that Marcelit trained in was a branch of water magic, which made it even more attractive to him. When he finally managed to study something, I laughed. So that's how it is. Let's activate it and see. The god equipment was activated and a blue divine light enveloped the semigod blood mage. Then, countless amounts of blood spurted out from his body, turning into streaks of red arrows that shot into the distance. Due to the large amount of blood loss, the already heavily injured Marcelit lay unconscious in the water. Stonevilla's ocean bottle, the legendary god equipment of the ancient sea god. It was said that in ancient times, it was capable of stirring up endless waves. Stonevilla was the husband of the water elemental god Alos, who had created this desperate situation. Although this ancient god equipment had lost most of its power due to the passing of the ancient god, it still retained one of its abilities. Stonevilla's ocean bottle. Upon activation, it can restore the liquid around the user to its most basic state. This was the result of the system's appraisal. It sounded confusing, but it was actually easy to understand after using it twice. Actually, this god equipment didn't have much use. It could only restore a mixture of liquid back to its natural state. For example, if you were to mix a bottle of seawater and river water, under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to separate them. However, if the god equipment was activated, it would be able to separate them into a bottle of river water and a bottle of seawater. After losing the support of a true god's divine power, this was basically the most useless god equipment in history. However, at this moment, this weakest god equipment in history had done a great service by directly killing off a semigod. Marcelit's entire body was covered in other people's blood. Blood magic was a branch of water magic, so naturally, blood was also a type of liquid. As a result, under the effects of the god equipment, the other people's blood returned to where it belonged, directly returning Marcelit to his original state of being unable to move. Furthermore, due to the backlash of magic and the sudden loss of blood, his current state was probably even worse than when he was heavily injured by the nine-headed dragon. Sometimes, the retribution of the unjust came just this quickly, and the manifestation of justice was just this simple. I viciously punched the face of the villain who had attempted to murder Marcelit and smiled in satisfaction. After that, I stared blankly at the bottle that had fallen into the water. Around the bottle, the omnipresent flood had dissipated. Obviously, even if it was a city of rain created by a divine power forbidden spell, it would still be restored to its natural state by this god equipment. Wasn't it said that due to the existence of the two goddesses of creation, the ancient world was a female society? So it turns out that the water elemental god Alos was a husband. Of course, this was just a joke. However, from another angle, it proved that, from a certain standpoint, the ancient sea god Stonevilla's divine power was indeed able to suppress the water elemental god Alos. I vaguely understood that this god equipment left behind by the previous husband of the water elemental god was probably the key to dispel the national forbidden spell, City of Rain. TMPH, let's not talk about how we have already fallen out with each other. Why should I help the Ottoman Empire to dispel this problem? Right now, the ocean bottle of Stonevilla, which has lost its divine power, can only maintain a space of around 2 meters. How can it possibly resist against the entire forbidden spell of the gods? However, it was very useful now. I kept the bottle and placed it in my bosom. Under the influence of the god equipment, the surrounding space became clean. Even though we managed to defeat that unlucky bloodmage so easily, the problem before us still remained. If we didn't settle everything in the remaining 5 minutes, we might not even have the chance to escape from the enraged nine-headed dragon emperor. Since I don't have enough power, let's try my tricks. Heloise, can you help me contact Longtu Basra? Chapter 119. Picking up an old man. Didn't you ask him if he knows how to refine pills or if he has a few decades or even 100 years of cultivation to find a successor? At the very least, you should have asked him if he has any godly weapons or if he has a wealthy and beautiful young daughter. After knocking out Marcelit, the first thing I did was to send out Heloise to transform into a bat. She held her former milk bottle Stonevilla's ocean bottle in her mouth to ward off the rain and act as a temporary aerial scout. Since Marcelit was able to find us, it was definitely possible for other assassins to follow us as well. However, even if there were royal secret agents following us, I didn't think that they would be able to avoid Heloise's detection. After all, in such a heavy downpour and flood, even a high-level lurker would be able to remain invisible. However, it would be impossible for their bodies to vanish. If they were to move underwater, a strange hole would probably appear in the water. It was the same for Mag's invisibility. All sorts of camouflage and camouflage abilities would be greatly reduced in water. Vanish in the day? Your wet footprints are still here. Camouflage? Sorry, the color faded. Next time, remember to buy some high-grade waterproof paint. The one who used invisibility. The water is all over your body. Are you planning to cosplay as a water elemental? What was gratifying was that Heloise didn't find any other scouts. That meant that there was probably no one else. When she reported that she found a white-bearded old man on a tree not too far away, I couldn't help but think of the classic scenes in the night novels of the past. Thus, I asked the question at the top of the page. After all, in night novels, picking up a white-bearded old man out of nowhere was usually the start of the protagonist's rise to power. For example, some old man, some god, or some senior expert. It really is fate. He really does have a wealthy daughter and she has long been interested in you. What? Daso's Minute. This old man is Krovin Minute. He is the previous emperor of the Ottoman Empire and the elder brother of your cute junior. What? Aren't you going to pay your respects to father-in-law? Your snack quota for tomorrow is gone. If you don't shut up, I'll turn you into a drooling dog and replace all your daily snacks with dog biscuits. Expired ones. As expected, Heloise was instantly rendered speechless by this threat that could very well come true. Even though I said that, I was overjoyed. Without a doubt, I had picked up a big fish out of thin air. It seemed that Marsalit was here to bring the former emperor away. However, as long as I could escape from Kajisi, just the news of the old emperor's existence would be enough for me to play countless tricks. Sure enough, it's just like in the Knight Rider novels. If you kill a monster, you'll drop a treasure. Sigh, for a demigod to end up like this, it's really tragic. The blood mage Emperor Marsalit had been thrown to the knight accompanying him. Under the system's determination, despite being a demigod, he didn't have a single semigod equipment. The few decent equipment he had didn't even reach the epic rank. However, that blood-dripping dragon head emblem was something that I coveted. Blood Dragon Royal Emblem, the emblem of the Emperor. Although it represents the highest authority of the Ottoman Empire, it is nothing but trash in your hands. However, a certain emperor would probably look forward to obtaining it again. After all, other than being an object of proof, this emblem made of a special metal has many undiscovered secrets. While sighing at how poor this boss was, I turned my attention to a spot not too far away. A gigantic 9-headed dragon was blocking our escape route. That was the crucial point. Darn it, the coastline is so long. Why did we have to come ashore here? However, I also knew that this wasn't purely a coincidence, nor was it my lucky acting up again. Rather, it was a result of a freak combination of factors. More than a month ago, the Ottoman Empire had stationed a large number of troops here, including semigods. As these unlucky fellows posed too much of a threat, they were chosen by the 9-headed dragon emperor as the first wave of attack. Although they were both semigods, the 9-headed hydra evolved into a semigod 9-headed dragon emperor wasn't something that a human semigod could deal with. Back then, that human semigod was instantly killed. After that, the 9-headed dragon emperor didn't seem to have any intentions of coming ashore. Instead, it acted on its own in the river. Now that it had come ashore, naturally, it would come ashore here. The moment it came ashore, it was blocked by Basra. Thus, after a series of unforeseen events, he was like a mountain blocking our path, leaving us helpless. The battle on the other side was still extremely intense. Basra had the upper hand in all aspects. All kinds of dragonslayer and dragon-sealing god equipment appeared one after another, slashing the head of the immobilized 9-headed dragon emperor until it was bleeding profusely. However, the problem was that top-tier creatures like the 9-headed hydra were known for their tenacious vitality and their ability to regenerate. It was said that even a 9-headed hydra with only one head left would be able to fully recover within 3 days. If it was really torn in half, it would still be able to regrow into 2 smaller bodies. For an existence at the level of the 9-headed dragon emperor, as long as it was near the water, its regenerative ability would be able to operate normally. Basra had the body of a Valkyrie that didn't know fatigue. He intended to destroy the 9-headed dragon emperor's dragon head over and over again, exhausting its regenerative ability to fight a war of attrition. He could afford to wait, but we couldn't. I knew that once the Great Judgment was over, the 9-headed dragon would immediately make a comeback. At that time, there would still be a chance for us to fight this battle. Charging forward would be no different from sending us to our deaths. However, was there any way to win without a direct confrontation? After racking my brains, I really found an unorthodox method. Lomtu Basra, I am the god's envoy of the god of law. The one who cast the forbidden spell is also on our side. Let me tell you a piece of bad news. The effective time of the forbidden spell is almost up. In 5 minutes, that chain will disappear. If I didn't guess wrongly, the 9-headed dragon emperor will also awaken. The outcome of the battle will be back to square one. Very soon, this city will fall and the seafolk will come ashore. I don't think you have the time to waste on it. The bat form Heloise landed in midair not too far away from Basra. Under my coercion, she carried out the basic duties of a tamed demon and sent a message on my behalf. I have a plan here, but it is obviously against the rules. It will depend on your decision. If you are willing to execute it, nod your head. The plan is like this. We will help you block that foolish snake for a short period of time. You just have to hurry up. After explaining the plan, I hesitated for a moment. However, I still didn't want to let go of the prey in front of me. In the midst of battle, Basra nodded his head fiercely, agreeing to my plan. The next moment, he raised both his hands and lightning gathered in his hands. Following which, the dragon's spear on his back swelled up once more, to the point that it was almost the size of a small boat. Following which, lightning was infused onto it. Under the glow of lightning, it turned into an indestructible lightning spear. However, it wasn't too late. Following Valkyrie's summon, a portion of the dark clouds parted and a sliver of moonlight descended. As the god of moonlight, Valkyrie, Basra could only use his full strength under the moonlight. The lightning spear was infused with a pale white unique energy. The tip and the edge of the spear were coated with a layer of silver light. It seemed unremarkable, but in reality, it was a gift from a true god. With the addition of the moonlight blade and the blessing of the god of hunting, the might of the giant spear increased exponentially. Ain's spear of destruction. Even though the nine-headed dragon struggled violently, the sea monster stirred up a torrential river. At this moment, the waves rumbled and lightning flashed incessantly, as though it was the end of the world. However, no matter how hard the Hydra struggled, it was still unable to move in the face of Basra's dragon chain. Roar, roar, roar. Even though the dragon slayer roared furiously and the mountains shook, the lightning spear that seemed slow but was actually fast still struck the nine-headed dragon. Roar, roar, roar. I curse you. I curse you to never be redeemed and freed. I curse you to always be in the nightmare of losing your loved ones and never be able to sleep peacefully. Damned butcher. Under the Dragon Emperor's cries of pain and curses, 3 dragon heads were severed. Countless green poisonous blood spurted out and the surrounding water turned into a fatal venom that devoured flesh and soul. Heh, your screams and curses are my best lullaby. After that, Basra floated over to us without even looking at the results of his battle against the nine-headed dragon. I could only helplessly order Irene Baylor to charge forward, intending to replace Valkyrie's position. Sigh, it's almost done regrowing a dragon head in 19 seconds. This nine-headed dragon is truly difficult to deal with. As expected, the moment I entered the nine-headed dragon's defensive range, lightning, flames, venom, and icicles were all aimed at me. Even though the nine-headed dragon was still screaming in pain and cursing Longtu for his misfortune, even though 2 of the nine-headed dragon's heads were still spurting poisonous blood, the other 7 heads had already recovered their combat strength. This is the benefit of having many heads. Should I go back and modify our bay? Times are changing, and the 3-headed Cerberus is obviously outdated. 12 Cerberus shouldn't be too many. It's a pity that our bay is currently in his rebellious phase, so he probably won't accept my modifications. Not only did he reject my nickname, he even said that he wouldn't accept my modifications even if the world were to be destroyed. Even though the previous enhancements were all pretty good. He even forced me to cancel the function of automatically crowing at 6 o'clock every day. As the army commander, it's important for me to supervise my subordinates to do morning exercises on time. Haven't you heard of the story of dancing at the sight of the rooster? Did he shrink back after being called a void rooster? Didn't I get called a void rooster every day? How useless. Right, why don't I try adding a few more wheels to him? It seems that transforming is quite popular these days. The 4 destructive dragon breaths were right in front of me, but I was still thinking about something else. This wasn't because I was looking down on my opponent. The 9-headed dragon emperor, who had been through countless battles, was an experienced veteran. The dragon breaths had chosen the best spots to land. The 4 dragon breaths landed in 4 different directions, and they just happened to intersect with each other. If nothing unexpected happened, no matter how I dodged, I would have died. But, since I didn't die, something unexpected happened. The galloping ice warhorse suddenly vanished and transformed into a miniature young snow woman who sat on my shoulder. Right after that, she spread open her golden wings and flapped them with all her might, transforming the momentum of my charge into propelling me upwards. I, who had transformed into a war angel, suddenly shot up from the ground. As a war angel, controlling the Order Holy Flames was a racial talent. At this moment, the holy flames on my wings and forehead instantly evaporated the raindrops. The heavy rain didn't affect me much, but I didn't dare to stop flying. I abruptly rose higher to avoid the next chain of attacks from the nine-headed dragon. As expected, a few seconds later, the place where I was previously at was completely covered by the lightning storm and the sudden increase in the flood. This was common knowledge when fighting with top-tier combat power. Against an enemy who was excessively agile and had great concealment abilities, it was best not to tangle with him. Instead, it was best to throw a large AoE attack to destroy him and any possible hiding places he could be. If Renee was in my position, even with my abilities, she would have died long ago. Being able to predict the enemy's attack methods in advance was undoubtedly a huge difference in combat experience. But now, while I was spinning in midair to avoid the dragon's attacks, I was continuously sending ice magic attacks at the nine-headed dragon. Yes, ice magic, and it was a bronze rank magic that was below the third circle. Ice magic, the type that the nine-headed dragon could ignore the most. Of course, now that I had temporarily risen to silver rank, I should be able to use fifth circle magic. But it was a pity that I didn't know a single fourth circle or five-circle silver rank magic because I didn't want to waste my skill points. If I lacked in quality, I would make up for it with quantity. My random ice arrows and the ice shards that I casually formed could also be used as artificial hailstones to rain down from the sky. But it was a pity that beneath the hailstones wasn't the fragile glass of a car, nor was there a car owner who wanted to cry because he forgot to buy insurance. The innate water magic of the ancient sea monster below was in no way inferior to any top-tier water mage. Ice magic was inextricably linked to water magic, and the nine-headed dragon's ice dragon head was an expert in freezing magic. My meager amount of hailstones wasn't enough to deal with it. However, when that ice dragon head completely ignored my attacks and even showed a look of disdain, the nine-headed dragon's main body met with a little trouble. A frightening blue color appeared on his skin, and a thin layer of ice actually formed on his body, causing him to enter a frozen state. He really is tough. Even if the system didn't say that he couldn't resist the freezing air, he still managed to resist half of its effects. I never did things that were meaningless. From the very start, that seemingly meaningless attack of mine was actually me doing my best to prevent the effects of the freezing air from activating. Freezing air, a type of soundless and fatal cold air. It can be attached to the physical body and weapons, and it can also be used together with ice magic. Anyone who comes into contact with it will have their movements slowed by 1%, and they will receive 1 point of ice damage per second. This effect can be stacked. If the movement speed is slowed by more than 20%, the target will be frozen, their thinking will become rigid, and many other negative effects. If the movement speed is slowed by more than 50%, the target may die at any moment due to hypothermia. This ability wasn't particularly powerful, but it had the advantage that no living creature was immune to it. Of course, I didn't expect to be able to freeze an ultimate creature like the nine-headed dragon to death, but this super disgusting negative effect of freezing and slowing down even the target's thinking and reaction speed would be effective in helping me complete my dangerous mission. Meanwhile, on the other side, the battle was also nearing its end. Are you willing to follow the god's laws at all times, and fight for the sake of law and justice? Kolo's voice was trembling with excitement. Performing a special ritual for the semigod Valkyrie wasn't something that any ordinary bishop would have the opportunity to do. That's right, from the very start, my goal was quite clear. Since the only one on our side that could threaten the nine-headed dragon was Basra, then increasing Basra's combat strength was the best choice right now. And as long as he had a law job class, he would be able to increase his power by 1 rank in the Great Judgment. As for Semigod, increasing his power by 1 rank, fine, it was impossible for him to reach the level of a true god, but it was quite possible for his combat strength to explosively increase to the point where he could easily suppress the nine-headed dragon. Of course, according to my calculations, This excessive power would also cause the Great Judgment to end prematurely, which wasn't something that Valkyrie's body could withstand. In the end, it would most likely result in mutual destruction. However, Basra was already a dead man, so why would he care about this? The only thing he was worried about was whether or not he could kill this dragon. But right now, even with the help of the God Equipment page, in order to grant Basra a level 1 law job class, he still had to follow the procedure and finish chanting that long prayer. Besides, the ritual was a holy one, so naturally, it couldn't be moved in the slightest. And the 9-headed dragon wasn't an idiot either. The ice mage who was able to freeze him in midair was obviously stalling for time, while his mortal enemy, the butcher, was doing something unknown. It was obvious that it wasn't a good thing for the 9-headed dragon. And so, he unhesitatingly raised all 9 of his heads, and a berserk dragon breath gathered on each of his heads. If he really let them all out, not only would Kolos and the others die for sure, the entire pier would probably disappear without a trace. No matter what the situation is, no matter what schemes they have, let's just attack first, then think about it later. I like this way of thinking, because I've always been like this. Heloise, Plan C. Let's give him one. Chapter 120. The violent storm didn't show any signs of stopping. Not far away, the slaughter and screams of shock were coming to an end. Just as the Sea Tribe was about to obtain their new capital, our journey of escape was also coming to an end. The 9-headed dragon in front of us opened its bloody mouth, causing the remaining 7 dragon heads to spit out 7-colored dragon blood. Meanwhile, all sorts of destructive magical powers gathered together. Under the careful control of the 9-headed dragon, the 7 dragon breaths finally formed a colorful floating ball of light. This was a lethal ball of elemental energy. This was the specialty of multi-headed dragons. Soon, when all the magical elements finally merged into one, the colorful ball of light finally became pure, and a light that could destroy everything would be born. This was how top-tier magical beasts fought. They abandoned all useless tricks and did their best to strengthen their physical bodies and race's natural talents. From the looks of it, the dragon breath with multiple elements would finally condense into a non-elemental shockwave. With the 9-headed dragon emperor's power level, although he didn't have 2 dragon heads stacked on top of each other, he was already comparable to a forbidden spell. A powerful physical body and a powerful natural talent attack were the foundational reasons why a top-level creature like a dragon would be able to crush everything. When fighting against them, who were always unreasonable, it was still up to one's power to speak. Judging from the magical waves, I estimated that if this attack hit, not only would everyone here be destroyed, even the entire pier area would be destroyed. H, do you think that you're the only one who knows how to use it? Heloise, Plan C. Give him the first attack. Queen, I can't do it. What? Queen, I also want to use it, but do you think that I don't need time to prepare? At least give me 5 more minutes. Can't you understand that reinforcements need to be late? How can a hero rely on reinforcements at such a critical moment? Do it yourself. Don't count on us supporting characters, I believe in you. Hearing her retort, which sounded rather modern, I made up my mind not to tell this silly cat any more nonsense, but at the same time, I was truly helpless. There wasn't enough time, so it was understandable that Heloise wasn't prepared. But if this combined dragon breath was used, there would probably be no need for any plans. After all, nothing would be left. Damn it. Big guy, look at this. I took a deep breath. I had no intention of charging forward, and directly landed on the opposite side of the cliff from where Kolos was. What I was going to do next would probably be completely meaningless with my wings. Original Sin Fiend Celestial. The moment I retracted my wings, a strong sense of exhaustion from dispelling my war angel form engulfed me. I didn't even have the time to sigh about this as the light of chaos that followed transformed me into another form, Original Sin Demon God. The angle of my vision suddenly increased by a few centimeters, as if I had suddenly become much taller. My breath carried the smell of sulfur, which was the mark of a demon. Her originally white skin had turned into an ugly layer of light blue magma. Strange magic runes kept flashing in accordance to her breathing rhythm. She seemed to be an elemental life form. My chaos bloodline caused blue lightning to run amok in my veins. Then, It shot out from the magic runes. The overflowing energy caused the rainwater in the air to evaporate. Lightning flashed in my eyes. When it finally stabilized, I looked as though a demon god had descended into this world. I didn't like this transformation at all. Apart from the fact that the power of chaos had a bad reputation and might bring me trouble, it was also because this final boss form of a villain was truly ugly. It always reminded me of the dark history of being a Lich and scaring myself by looking at a mirror in the middle of the night. But right now, I needed this ugly transformation. Although it was ugly, it was indeed powerful and not warm at all. Spirits of ice and snow, storms of the polar regions, listen to my command. If the War Angel form was a high-speed charge-type transformation, which was suitable for powerful melee combat, then this original Sin Demon God form would strengthen magic control, willpower, intelligence, and other magical abilities. It was a classic magic transformation. Under my will, the end of the rotten old era and all creation shall soon come. A long incantation brought with it the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Spirits of ice and snow sang in the air as the top-level ice forbidden spell Ice Eon appeared. Different from Marguerite's knockoff version, the copy of Ice Eon didn't even have a third of the original's power. But as the creator of this forbidden spell, I was able to bring out 200% of its power. The theory behind this forbidden spell was extremely simple. It was to use the purest ice and snow magic to crystallize and repeatedly compress it before blasting it out. It was no different from a fireball. But just like what Heloise had said before, because it was simple, it was pure. Because it was so pure that there was nothing else to it, it matched the essence of ice and snow, making it powerful. Semigod equipment, Dark God's Breath of Death. Special Effect 1, Soul Conversion. Extract the souls of the dead and convert them into pure death magic. Death magic entered my hands, but it was forcefully converted into the purest ice and snow magic. Should I thank Calisin for the massacres and the many years of accumulation? Countless souls created this semigod equipment to store a large amount of magic power, and this was exactly what I lacked the most at the moment. Winter's dormancy is death, but it is also rebirth. With me as the core, magic power overflowed from the raised black scepter. Along with the incantation getting louder and louder, the blue magic runes that represented ice and snow spread across the entire land. The ice and snow spirits dancing in the air were singing in unison. Before I even made my move, the entire cliff had already turned into a land of ice. The pouring rain in the air had already turned into a heavy snowflake. The summer wind that was supposed to be warm and humid had already turned into a bone-chilling storm. Furthermore, as the temperature plummeted, a thin layer of ice started to form on the surface of the flood. For the first time, the endless flood met its natural enemy. Finally, the two dragon heads that had finished regenerating raised their heads. The moment they came to life, they stared at me. Their huge eyes, which were the size of adults, shot out an angry red light. That was undisguised killing intent. This distance and the snowflakes were unable to obstruct their line of sight. They were assessing the threat that my magic could pose to them. In the eyes of the nine-headed dragon, as long as they could get rid of Longtu and those annoying chains in one fell swoop, so what if they were hit by that forbidden spell? It wasn't the first time that Fioro's Hydra had been hit by a forbidden spell. In any case, their skin was thick and they wouldn't die. In just a few days, they would be able to completely regenerate. However, with just a glance, he knew that the situation was different from the past. Their regeneration ability was a racial talent, but it was also a comprehensive ability of water magic. Fioro's was confident that as long as there was water, he wouldn't die. However, what would happen if there was no water? Water mags would usually train in ice magic to increase the lethality and flexibility of their spells. However, this didn't mean that there was no conflict between these two types of magic. On the contrary, pure water mags hated ice mags the most. Water mags usually took the form of water arrows or huge waves. Fundamentally speaking, it was the control and usage of liquids. Thus, they had two natural enemies. Fire magic, which represented high temperatures, would evaporate liquids. On the other hand, ice magic, which originated from the same source as water magic, represented low temperatures and would turn liquids into solid ice. Regardless of whether it was water vapor or ice, if they weren't in a liquid state, they wouldn't be able to fit the concept of water. That would break their foundation. The nine-headed dragon Fioros pondered, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. It was obvious that the spell in front of him was an ice-forbidden spell. Without even making a move, it was able to cause a natural phenomenon to resonate with the elemental spirits. It was obvious that this was the unique characteristic of a super-forbidden spell. Although the mage in front of him didn't have any magic undulations, bronze-rank magic meant nothing to him. The black rod was releasing an endless amount of magic power. Furthermore, the ice mage was able to freeze him, who had an extremely high magic resistance. This had already proven his outstanding aptitude in ice magic. If this forbidden spell were to successfully freeze him, would he be able to enjoy the rest of his life in a block of ice that would never thaw? His regeneration ability wouldn't be of any help in such a situation. Hydra who went into the fridge and forgot to come out. I can even collect some tickets to the exhibition. This joke wasn't funny at all to him. If he were to take it a step further and freeze all the surrounding water, rainwater, and his own bodily fluids into ice, then his regeneration ability would be crippled. It was possible for him to be frozen into an ice cube, shatter into ice shards, and die. Fioros didn't think much of the human's forbidden spell, nine-headed dragon emperor. However, the more he looked at it, the more uncertain he became. Under the feet of the mage, the frozen ground suddenly split open. The barrier between the void and reality was opened, revealing a huge hole that resembled a demonic abyss. Then, a gigantic black skeletal hand rose up and pierced into the sturdy ground. Just a single finger bone was the size of an adult. However, this was only the beginning. The true nightmare was returning to the human world. As the giant, pitch-black skull returned to the human world from the underworld, even though the skull with the crown on it had a ghastly smile and a strange karkaka sound, all living beings who saw it instinctively screamed in fear, as if they had seen the Grim Reaper reaping all lives. "We shall bring an equal end and death to all living beings," the chanting continued. On the head of the skeleton king that was laughing eerily, the mage who was standing on the crown of ice continued chanting. The crown made of ice crystals and gemstones became his throne. The cliff was now a field of snow. On top of the frost, the king of ice was laughing wantonly. Just his existence was enough to bring an end to all living beings. Beneath the cliff, endless ice started to freeze the flood before them. Even the air started to freeze. When the king of eternal night descended, all living beings would welcome their end. Even though the ice had yet to reach the nine-headed dragon, fear finally appeared in the blood-red eyes of the gigantic dragon. Under the gaze of the skeleton king, nine-headed dragon Emperor Fioros had never been so close to death before. Even though his rainbow-colored dragon breath was still gathering, the instinctive fear of a living being on the brink of death caused the immortal ancient beast to tremble. This wasn't determined by strength. It was an instinctive fear caused by the food chain. The black skeleton king in front of him was the predator of all living beings. The nine-headed dragon also knew that the skeleton king in front of him, who was taller than him, wasn't real. It was just a projection of a soul world brought about by the release of a forbidden spell. Although this was the privilege of a powerful being who was once close to the level of a true god and might be rare in this era, it wasn't much to an ancient being like him. However, the key point was that the might of a god's projection was the true appearance of that person, that god. He had seen Lady Storm's god's projection before. The furious true god's projection that created a storm and destroyed a city couldn't even compare to the might of this black skeleton king. The only one that could compare was the ancient death god Ael's projection that he had seen by chance. Ael, the god of the dead. Also in the form of a skeleton and wielding a black god equipment scepter. Could he really be that legendary person? I heard that he recently appeared in the underground world and even killed a demon count. Could this be the legendary, super forbidden spell that directly destroyed the kingdom of the elves' Ice Aeon? Under our will, the Ice Aeon shall once again return to the mortal world and the world that belongs to the dead shall once again. At this stage, the forbidden spell wasn't something that could be stopped at will. Even if the spellcaster stopped chanting, the snow elves in mid-air would continue chanting. At this moment, under the rising and falling chorus, The strange incantation reverberated throughout the entire battlefield. Even if one didn't understand this foreign language, everyone could understand the true meaning of this strange language. That wasn't some malicious curse. On the contrary, it was just like a historian narrating a new epic that he had recorded. That was a possibility. The spellcaster was narrating the future that he believed to be inevitable when the ice eon descends once again, when everything is frozen once again. All living beings and gods will either die or fall into eternal slumber. The dead who are not afraid of the frost will become the new masters of the era. Even though it was just a simple description and statement, it carried endless destruction and despair. This was the doomsday hymn of Emperor Yunye Ice Eon. This was an unimaginable distortion. However, from the perspective of natural history, it was indeed a possible doomsday that could happen in the future. In order to bring the true doomsday that he hoped for to all living beings, the completely insane Emperor Yunye created the most dangerous and insane forbidden spell in history. The most unimaginable thing was that he actually succeeded. From the day this forbidden spell was born, the Ice Eon was destined to become the nightmare of all living beings. When he realized that the opponent in front of him could possibly be that person, Fioras felt despair. The name of a person was like the shadow of a tree. Even a second-rate god at his peak would have to take a detour to avoid him. His army had once hunted down countless existences of the same level as him, and he was infamous in the world of top-notch demonic beasts. With such a deep memory of his past, it would be foolish of him to still be unable to recognize the person in front of him. Emperor Yunye. The terrified nine-headed dragon emperor screamed out the forbidden name. His roar echoed throughout the entire city. Countless gazes were directed in his direction and the entire world trembled. At this moment, Fioras didn't doubt that this forbidden spell would claim his life. As long as the complete Ice Eon was released, the one who should be worried about whether he would be able to preserve his corpse in one piece is the city, not him. That was indeed the case. As long as the complete Ice Eon was released, the effects of the City of Rain would be negligible. That was because this place would be a polar region with nothing but glacier for the next 100 years. The seven-colored dragon's breath had reached its final moments. The enemy that the Dragon Slayer had pursued for his entire life was about to fall in front of him. However, when he was about to die, it wasn't the time for him to take revenge. Ah, catcher! The two newly born dragon heads bit off their 6 dragon heads. The pitiful 9-headed dragon emperor turned into a 3-headed snake. After losing its 6 energy sources, the remaining main head was finally able to freely control the ball of dragon's breath that was about to go berserk. Thus, he spat out his dragon's breath with all his might and unhesitatingly pushed the ball of light towards Emperor Yunye. At this moment, the majestic me was actually on the verge of tears. I was just a bronze-rank rookie ice mage. The magic power in my body wasn't even enough to create a blizzard. What Ice Eon? It was just a distant dream. However, just like how I comprehended Bladestorm, it wasn't difficult to comprehend the Ice Eon that I created. However, without the support of a foundation, I definitely wouldn't be able to release it. Ding! Congratulations for comprehending the semigod tier destruction forbidden spell, Ice Eon. System notification. What? You want more explanations? Anyway, you won't be able to use it no matter what, so why waste my saliva? If you really manage to release it, remember to buy a coffin. Why? Do you think that I should use this rare luck to buy a lottery ticket? Are you dumb? How can a dead person receive a lottery ticket? Right, you can go and bet on a ball. It just so happens that I can earn a sum of money. It is a gamble that isn't difficult at all. As long as I bet on your tails, I will definitely win. As usual, I ignored the chatterbox system that spits more than the main text. At this moment, in order to restrain the 9-headed dragon who didn't care about me at all, I only intended to use Ice Eon to scare him. Since I have the magic power stored in the Dark God's Breath of Death, I might as well use it to scare him. However, the moment I opened my mouth, I knew that the situation was bad. I had gone overboard. Damn it. I can't stop. Chapter 121. Damn it. I can't stop it. The ice spirits dance and sing around me. The incantation that comes out of my mouth spreads through their singing, resonating with the entire world. It's just like how a skilled knight can ride a war horse to perform all sorts of tricks, while a rookie knight would often be thrown off the horse and dragged along. Right now, I am that unlucky rookie knight who is being dragged along. Furthermore, the more ferocious a horse is, the harder it is to tame. Once a top-tier forbidden spell starts, it's hard to end. It's just like how a rocket can't stop once it takes off. My past experience and urgent judgment made me careless. The difference between the living and the dead caused the incantation to deviate from the start. When I release a super forbidden spell that exceeds my standard, when I use the black staff as the source of magic, I turn from a knight to a rookie who is being dragged along. Even I myself become a part of the forbidden spell. The elated dancing ice spirits also bless me with ice. Using the forbidden spell once again, my comprehension of the power of ice and snow continues to increase. At this moment, on my interface, the soul imprint of the ice treader is recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. 7%. 14%. 30%. What kind of joke is this? I don't see you guys moving normally. Why are you guys causing trouble at this crucial moment? In order to prevent the forbidden spell from going out of control and turning into a bomb that could explode at any moment, I unhesitatingly put all of my skill points into the ice skill tree. Ice control, bone-chilling chill and other talents lit up all the way. As long as it's a necessary skill under the Ice Eon skill tree, I would crazily add points into it. The effect of putting these skills into it was instantaneous. Although I am still far from Ice Eon, the mastery of these ice skills gives me some confidence in casting forbidden spells. At the very least, I don't have to worry about accidentally turning myself into a bomb. However, blessings don't come in pairs. At the same time that I solved the problem of self-destruction, a new problem has appeared. In my eyes, the entire world has turned into glacier and icebergs. Other than ice, there is nothing else in this ice field. All life is sleeping under the snow. This isn't an illusion, but the effect that the forbidden spell is about to achieve. The ice spirits are happily telling one another about the beautiful future that they are dreaming of. However, if the snow elves liked it, the living would definitely not like it. Just as the system said, if I really used a forbidden spell, I would probably be able to save the coffin. Perhaps even my physical body and soul would be frozen here, and my endless reincarnation would finally be able to rest. Irene Baylor, knock me out. Hearing my command, the cute frigid More Snow girl transformed into an ice demon in midair. But before she could land, the black skeletal hand grabbed her and hesitated for a moment before tossing her far away. My God's might projection automatically acted as my defense. If it wasn't for the fact that I instinctively treated Irene as a trustworthy comrade, that gigantic hand probably wouldn't have just flung me away. It would have directly crushed me to death. 82%. 89%. 91%. The restoration of my soul imprint was also nearing its end. The good thing that I should have been happy about in the past was like a talisman that hastened my death. I could feel that when the ice treader was completely restored, it would be the time when Ice Eon was blasted out, and it would also be the time when I breathed my last. If even my life force was turned into the driving force of the forbidden spell, then it would be unreasonable for me to not die. Just as I was despairingly awaiting the arrival of the final judgment, the nine-headed dragon actually made a heroic sacrifice by biting off 6 of its own dragon heads, forcefully changing the direction of the dragon's breath so that the lethal breath would be directed towards me. I was immediately overjoyed, and I almost wanted to hug this ugly dragon head and give it a kiss or two. That's right, I was overjoyed, not angry or fearful. The forbidden spell on my side had already reached the stage where it would automatically be cast. Just like how it chased away Irene Baylor, it would also instinctively make judgments to eliminate any sudden situations that might hinder the successful casting of the forbidden spell. At this moment, when a similarly threatening offensive spell was coming at me, if I didn't guess wrongly, there was only one way that it could respond to it. Let us bring about an eternal end to the living, Ice Eon. As expected, the ice breath was released in advance, colliding fiercely with the ball of dragon's breath in front of me. The clash between the forbidden spells was abnormally strange. The collision of ice and dragon's breath brought about a whirlwind of death. Everything caught in the whirlwind would first freeze and then shatter into pieces. The river here was completely destroyed. Right now, the river became dry, and the river water became ice shards. A blinding white light stole the sight of mortals. By the time I recovered my strength, all that was left in front of me was ruins. I should be thankful that the previous flood had driven away all the residents of the docks. The impact of the forbidden spell before me had completely destroyed the entire docks. Although both were incomplete forbidden spells, I still had the absolute advantage. I was still able to catch my breath on the cliff, but half of Hydra's body had already been frozen solid. 2 of its dragon heads had already turned into ice shards amidst their wails. This was the best proof that I was the victor. If it wasn't for the fact that it had used all of its life force to protect its final main head, it was likely that this ancient demon would have died as well. Without going through the final stages of the forbidden spell's compression, purification, fusion, resonance, and many other processes, the current Iceon was incomplete. It was precisely because of its incompleteness that I was able to survive. I collapsed on the ground. All of my physical strength and magic power had been sucked dry. My transformation had already been automatically cancelled, but I was unable to get up. However, I knew that we should have already won. In the name of my lord Wumianzi, I bestow upon you the duty of a just knight. The inheritance ceremony had already ended, and the torturous 4 minutes had come to an end. Roar. Even though only one head remained, Fioras still roared in anger and unwillingness. He had already noticed that Basra's power was greatly increasing in the distance, and he could faintly guess what was about to happen. Hydra, who only had 1 dragon head left, discovered that it was the end of the world. However, a scene that left everyone speechless happened. While his power and power level rose rapidly, the body of Valkyrie, mentioned in Longtu's chapter, which was only at the level of a semigod, actually started to disintegrate. Specks of golden light circled around him. Calmly looking at his disintegrating physical body, Basra knew that it was time for him to return. Since he had accepted the law job, he didn't know what he would encounter when he returned. Although it is a pity that I won't be able to witness the end of this little snake, to be able to comprehend to such a level, even if it was only for an instant, is worth it. His legs had already disintegrated into golden light, but Valkyrie still calmly took out his sword and spear. After hesitating for a moment, he tossed the spear to the young female knight who had been looking at him with reverence. Keep it as a record. His name is Dragon Slayer. I admire your courage in charging at an evil dragon. You should be able to use him one day. Then, Basra took a look at the scenery of the mortal world and threw his sword towards the sky. This time, the golden sword didn't suddenly change shape or flash with lightning. Even the tail of the sword began to dissipate in the golden light. However, in the eyes of everyone, the sword couldn't be resisted at all. It was fated to be the end of the dragon. Basra, who threw the sword, didn't even aim. He knew that the sword would eventually land on the dragon's body. At that moment, he came into contact with the realm of true gods and infused the special divine power known as Dragon's Death into the sword. That was the divine power that he had just mastered. As the price for mastering the forbidden power, he returned to the realm of gods after the golden light dissipated. Just as the vanished Valkyrie Longtu said, not being able to witness the end of the 9-headed dragon was his only regret. However, in his heart, when this attack that reached the realm of gods was thrown out, Fioras was already destined to perish. At this moment, Hydra, who was born as a ferocious beast, didn't have the resolve to accept the end of the world. Even at the brink of death, he continued to struggle, resisting against the fate of certain death. The premature disappearance of Great Judgment allowed him to regain his freedom. However, the frozen half of his body restricted his mobility. He wanted to bite off his main head to escape alone, but it was a pity that he didn't have the strength or the dragon head to do so. It's over. Finally, the despairing Hydra actually shed a huge tearball. He knew that he was nearing the end. It's over. We finally won. We survived. This was the joy of me and the others. Hey! But suddenly, something inexplicable happened. A red figure fiercely collided with the long sword in the air. Ah! I curse you. Darned celestial tower. Darned Lamos I will make sure that you accompany me in hell. Without a doubt, The red figure who sacrificed himself to save the nine-headed dragon is the fallen Marsalit. However, he isn't a good person who sacrificed himself for the sake of others. He was thrown down by someone to block the spear. The knight who was guarding Marsalit had already fallen into the water, unconscious. Under the guidance of the remaining god power, the weakened Dragonslayer sword still pierced into Hydra's body. However, the effects of a semigod as a shield is miraculously good. Even though the gigantic body of the nine-headed dragon was reduced to ashes, the remaining half of the main dragon head started to regenerate. Yahweh! Fool, fool! The malicious-filled cry of the crow reverberates in the air. Then, after a distortion, it morphs into a familiar silhouette, the local guild leader of the Celestial Tower, Lamos I. Having colluded with the Seafolk, he had viewed the Seafolk's attack as a golden opportunity for revenge. Thus, he stared fixedly at the church, waiting for an opening. At this moment, he had been patiently waiting for an opportunity. Indeed, by making a move at the crucial moment, he was able to turn the situation around. Seeing that his vengeance was about to be avenged, Lamos I smiles widely. Behind him, the nine-headed dragon started to regenerate once again. Without the dragon sealing chains sealing it, even if there is only one dragon head, as long as he is given sufficient time and water, he would be able to return to his full form. Unless we completely destroy the main dragon head before the second dragon head regenerates, otherwise, we will end up as his food. At this point in the battle, we were actually taken advantage of by someone else. This really leaves us in despair. Yet, in this desperate situation, Renee, who has been fighting against the fear of death, stands up. Without saying a word, she jumps onto Shiva's transformed heavy boar, raises the dragon slaying that she just obtained and charges towards the undefeatable dragon. I didn't think that I would have to use this spear so soon. Everyone. It's not the time to despair yet. As long as we never give up, there is still hope. Frigid Moor transforms into the standard equipment of his former country's cavalry. The mist war flag at his back unfurls in the wind. That unyielding wall of defense in the howling wind is as sturdy as ever. The figure of the Mist King leading the charge is just like the past. The white-armored knight charges on the icy surface. The silver spear that he raises carries the determination to slay the giant dragon. The kingdom-protecting holy sword is surrounded by silver flames. Just like her ancestors, the silver-ranked knight princess is once again challenging the hopeless situation. Even if I am fated to die, rather than cowering on my sickbed like a coward, I would rather die valiantly on the path of charging. At this moment, the Night Princess finally understands the seemingly stubborn maxim recorded in her family's records. Perhaps, her ancestors also smiled as they charged towards their deaths. Even with the might of the dragon, even with the difference in strength, she knows that she will probably die here, but as long as this moment of honor exists, she will never regret it. Hopeless situation? That is indeed the case. At this moment, the regeneration of Hydra's body is about to come to an end. When he stands up once more, it will be the end of all life on land. Interesting. You never know what giving up is. This is indeed the rotten temper of the mist bloodline that has been passed down from generation to generation. Renee, if you survive this, I will admit that you are the true Mist King. At this moment, I can't let the younger generation look down on me. Thus, using my sword as a crutch, I stand up once more. Irene, who has returned, turns into a pair of wings that follow me as I charge forward. What is that? I will lead the charge. I am the only one on my side. Following Princess Renee are the royal knights of the Mist Kingdom. They know that they are nothing in front of the nine-headed dragon who is about to recover to his peak. However, isn't this desperate yet heroic charge the glorious death that every knight desires? No wonder Lord always says that the knights are a bunch of fools. They really are a bunch of adorable fools. Then, we, the Law faction, can't let others look down on us. Behind the knights, Kolos, who is exhausted from casting spells continuously, rides on the storm lightning. The two flower protectors, Deer and Moose, didn't fall behind. They continue to protect her from the left and back. That, Lord Kolos, at the end, there are some words that I have been holding in my heart for a long time. If I don't say them now, I won't have the chance to. Then continue holding them in. Cough, Lord Bishop, actually, I have something to say as well. Let us forget about those living treasures who were still trying to push each other back at the very end. At the very least, they fulfilled the oath that they promised their comrades to protect them. They really risked their lives to protect the most beautiful flower in their hearts. It is a pity that from the shocked expression on the flower's face, she really doesn't know about it. Then, it is a good thing that she can't speak her mind. Shaking my head, in the back of my mind, I am thinking of the final plan that I can come up with to stop my opponent. Suddenly, a voice rings beside my ear. Reporting to Queen, the preparations for Plan C are complete. Do you want to activate it? Then what else is there to say? What else is there to play in this world? Hurry up and do it. I am waiting for you to save me. What else is there to ask? Hurry up and activate it. Save me. Then, my snacks this year. I will take care of all your snacks for the next year. I will agree to any conditions. Alright, as expected, there is motivation when there is temptation. The next moment, I hear the sound that I have been waiting for. Deng deng deng. Catcher catcher. That is the sound of the mechanical chains and the door being opened. In the next second, the wall suddenly opens up, revealing the hidden base. The battleship that has been prepared is already floating in the air, ready to attack. When the cannons start firing, he has already begun his assault. The so-called Plan C is actually very simple. It is just to let Heloise enter the base underwater with the key, then at the crucial moment, open the exit on the surface to launch a pincer attack. Without a doubt, this is the most crucial moment. Next, under the encirclement of the three sides, it will be a battle of numbers against the few. In the base, the only remaining mage tower shoots out a dazzling fireball. In the first exchange, it shoots down the dumbfounded Emu's eye. Following that, the mage tower shoots out a series of fireballs, and the defensive cannons of the base start firing fatal lead bullet. The high-speed Vulture assault battleship has already begun its pursuit of the evil dragon. Shoot the dragon's head, that is its only weakness. My reminder is not in vain. In the next moment, with the coarse voice of the dwarfs, the main cannon of the battleship completes its adjustment. "Heh! I found prey." After that familiar catchphrase, the main cannon of the battleship fires a perfect parabola after charging. Following that, the last dragon head of the defenseless nine-headed dragon explodes. Just like in the legends, as long as all the dragon heads are destroyed at the same time, it represents the true destruction of the nine-headed dragon. The body that had just regenerated turns to ashes once again, allowing me to relax completely. We won. We finally won.